started. Eileen, opening statement, please.
Howell Township Planning Board meeting Thursday, November 4th, 2021. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on January 8th, 2021, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on January 8th, 2021, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on January 8th, 2021, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. Members of the public will have a chance to ask questions and comment on applications once the chairman opens the hearing up to members of the public. If you wish to ask questions or comments on an application, you will need to use the raise your hand feature, and we will bring you into the meeting one at a time. You will need to have audio and video capability. You will be sworn in, and you will be required to give your name and address. For anyone calling in, you can raise your hand by dialing *9, and to lower your hand, dial *9 again. You can also use *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77.
Thank you, Eileen. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bavai?
Here.
Mr. Dorado?
Here.
Mr. Husser?
Here.
Chief Kudrick?
Here.
Mr. Leggio?
Here.
Mr. Nicastro?
Here.
Councilwoman Richmond has been excused. Mr. Seaman?
Here.
Ms. Casper?
Here.
Mr. Cristiano? You're muted, Joe.
Here.
Thank you. And Chairman Tannenhouse,
Here.
you have a quorum.
Do we want to give John a minute or two before we get to the Pledge of Allegiance to see if he could just restart his Zoom, to see if his modulation will clear up?
You want to try that, John? Mr. Leggio?
Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna actually reactivate. Hold on.
Yeah, because we can't hear you. Thank you.
Okay, you're muted now.
Is that better?
A
A
little
little
bit.
better.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, can everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for all of our first responders and people serving both here and abroad. Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the
And to the
republic
republic which stands one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
Indivisible,
indivisible, and with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Do we have approval of minutes?
I have no minutes this evening.
Voucher,
I have no vouchers.
any correspondence?
I do have correspondence. I have a letter from Laura Delisandro, who is the attorney for Hutton Street 17 LLC. It is case number SP 1087. It's the first case on the agenda. She has asked that we adjourn this application and carry it to the board's December 2nd, 2021 meeting with no further notice. She also granted the board an extension of time to act on the application through December 31st, 2021.
Thank you. And we can accommodate them on December 2nd?
Well, I told her there's already 3 applications on that night, but I can put her there,
Fair enough.
so.
Chairman, should I make the note? Should I make the announcement?
Please.
Okay. If anybody's here this evening for case number SP 1087 Hutton Street 17 LLC involving Block 74 Lot 8, 4880 US Highway 9 South, that application is being carried on notice to the board's regularly scheduled meeting for December 2, 2021, 7 p.m. also by Zoom, such as this evening. It's not going to be heard this evening. You will not receive any further mailed or published notice. It's being carried on notice. Thank you.
Thank you. The only other item, I sent a list of possible meeting dates for 2022 to all the members today. If you would kindly take a look at it, and if you have any comments or anything, get them to me, or we can discuss them at a future meeting so we're ready for the reorg meeting. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, then we'll get into resolutions. First up is case number SD-2995. Chris Alzaver. The eligible voters are Chief Kudrick, Mr. Nicastro, Mr. Cristiano, and myself. Do I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to approve SD 2995.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Sorry, who was the second? Mr. Nicastro?
Yep.
Thank you. Chief Kudrick,
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro,
Yes.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized. Thank you.
Next case is number SP-1093. Eligible voters are Mr. Bavai, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Husser, Chief Kudrick, Mr. Seaman, Ms. Casper, Mr. Cristiano, and myself.
Make a
I'll
motion.
motion.
Make a motion to approve case number SP-1093.
I'll second.
Mr. Bavai,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Chief Kudrick,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Ms. Casper,
Yes.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
and Mr. Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
Next case is SP-1058A. Eligible voters are Mr. Dorado, Mr. Husser, Chief Kudrick, Mr. Nicastro, Mr. Seaman, Ms. Casper, and myself. Do I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve case number SP-1058A alpha.
Thank you.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Chief Kudrick,
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Ms. Casper,
Yes.
Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
Any submission waivers tonight?
I have no submission waivers this evening.
And we'll get into the applications. First application in front of the board is case number SD-2998, Wadsworth Development LLC. Who is counsel with that application, please?
Michael Herbert is the attorney.
Thank you.
Walter Hopkins is the engineer. Mr. Herbert, can you tell me who else I need to bring into the meeting?
Good evening. I have 3 witnesses, Aaron Mansour, Walter Hopkins, and Justin Osceola. I see Walter.
I see Justin in the audience.
And I know Aaron was logging on momentarily, so.
Okay, I don't see him yet.
Okay. Well, I can begin with Walter and Justin.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Hopkins, we'd like to swear you in. Mr. Hopkins, do you swear from the testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Can you please give us your business address for the record?
257 Monmouth Road, Oakhurst, New Jersey, 07755.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Maybe if Mr. Leggio can mute his computer, because there's a lot of background noise coming out from his system. Thank you.
Yeah, John, we also need you to be on video as well. You as well, Mr. Cristiano.
I don't think that's Mr. Leggio. He's
No.
muted.
I'll mute myself just to be certain, Mr. Dorado.
Want me to mute? See.
I'll mute everybody just to. Okay.
Okay, do you want me to begin?
Please.
Good evening, board members. It is a pleasure to be with you tonight. My name is Michael Herbert. I'm with the law firm of Parker McKay, and I represent the Wadsworth Development LLC. And we are bringing before you tonight an application for a 10-lot, it's for preliminary 10-lot subdivision with 8 residential lots for single-family dwellings, a 2-acre lot for an existing single-family dwelling, and 10-acre open space lot. We are utilizing the open land subdivision option, and the application is, for the most part, compliant with the township ordinances. There are only a couple of issues that remain. They include a fence that may be in the site triangle, and we'll make sure that fence is removed. We also will need a variance for both the 50 and the 100-foot buffer. And then there will be a need for a tree fund deposit. And the only reason that we're asking for the buffer is that we are creating what we believe to be a better application than the one that would normally be allowed for this property. And this is infill development. And the reason is that it is a treed lot, and it is our belief that if the houses are moved forward on the lot towards the street, that will eliminate the need for longer driveways. It will eliminate the need to remove a lot of the trees, and will leave a more pristine environment out there and a more desirable development. We are also looking to preserve the trees in the back so that homeowners would not be able to clear cut them. We'd be glad to file whatever easements or legal requirements are needed to preserve for that. I have with me 3 witnesses tonight. I have the representative of the applicant, which is Aaron Mansour. He is here for questions. I was not going to present any testimony from him unless board members have questions. Our engineer tonight is Walter Hopkins, and our planner is Justin Osceola. So with that, I know Mr. Hopkins has been sworn. I know that we have a number of exhibits. How do you want to do the exhibits, Mr. Chairman or Mr. Tomball Ekin?
Typically, Eileen has them already pre-marked. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yep.
it is.
So I can proceed off of that list?
Yes.
Okay.
And either
with that-
Walter or
I'm
I
sorry.
can share them, whichever you need.
All right. All right, I appreciate that. So with that, I'm going to now present Walter Hopkins. He is our engineer. Mr. Hopkins, if you could just tell the board your qualifications, by whom you're employed, and what your education background is.
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science from Drexel University in civil engineering. I'm a licensed professional engineer in states of New Jersey and New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. I'm a certified municipal engineer in the state of New Jersey. I'm also a professional planner in the state of New Jersey, although I will not be testifying on behalf of that this evening. I have had the pleasure of testifying before this board in the past, as well as your zoning board and surrounding communities, Marlborough, Freehold, and various communities throughout Monmouth, Ocean, and Middlesex counties.
Thank you. We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hopkins, if you could lay out the application for the board members and explain where the subdivision lines are going and how we came to the design that we have. And if you could just share with the board, I guess it would be the subdivision plans. I guess we're going to start with A3.
I don't have the exhibit list with me, but I do have a rendering. Is this what's listed as A3?
Yes.
Okay, so
Did
this,
you submit this to me?
I believe we did. If we didn't, I can switch over to just the black and white subdivision
Yeah,
plans.
because I don't believe I have this one.
Okay. Let me. Having technical difficulties here. I apologize. I'm having a
Take your time.
little bit of a.
You want me to put it on the screen?
I think I have it. It'd be easier if I could refer to it. Let me. I know I have it. It's just a matter of getting it in front of you.
There are many good things about virtual meetings, but one of them is not sharing screens.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. So I'm referring to page 4 of A3, which are the subdivision plans that were submitted to the board. Last revised October 20th, 2021. And just to reiterate a little bit of Mr. Herbert indicated, the overall tract size is just over 20 acres. It's at the corner of Ramtown Greenville Road and Michelle Court. It's also bordered by your access way to your elementary and middle school, which is Kosminski Way. The address, there are existing buildings and existing home that front on Ramtown Greenville Road, which is known as 238 Ramtown Greenville Road. It's all one block, also known as Block 3, Lot 25, and it is located in your ARE2 zone. To the north of the site is the elementary school. To the south is a residential subdivision developed in a similar manner to what's being proposed this evening along Michelle Boulevard. To the east, off site here is off to the other side of Ramtown Greenville Road is a development that has been approved. I don't know if it's under construction yet or not. It's in your R3 zone, which is a higher density than what we have in the RE2 zone. And to the west off site is also your middle school. What exists here are, I can switch to the existing conditions plan, which, as the board probably knows, is kind of a mishmash of various buildings, an existing single family home, some stone driveways, and a wooded area where the proposed development would be proposed.
Walter, while we have this close up, I know there's a fence that was a concern of the board engineer. If we could just, if we can point that out, that will be removed. You see the fence to be removed?
There's several fences.
Right.
I would just offer for testimony that if we didn't get the one that either Mr. Rizzo or Ms. Bell's office is requesting, that we would remove any fence that's in any site triangle.
Thank you. Continue.
And along with that, since we're here, we will be removing, I guess this is a converted chicken coop into a garage. that will be removed. There's an adjacent one-story structure which will be removed. Much of the driveways will be removed. This garage, which straddles the property line with the access way and the elementary school access, will be removed. So it's our intent really to clean this area up, this existing lot, but keep the existing dwelling and the one story masonry building to remain. What will be proposed, as Mr. Herbert had indicated, are 8 proposed residential lots for new homes. The existing home and that garage would stay on a 2-acre lot, and then what would remain would be a 10-acre parcel, just over 10 acres. I believe Ms. Bell's office letter had back in June had raised questions about the area and whether we met your requirement, and I can tell you this evening that the revised plans that were submitted to you do comply with your 50% open space dedication requirement. So again, we will be cleaning up the lot that fronts on Ramptown Greenville Road. There will be 8 lots proposed. All of those will front on Michelle Boulevard. If you drove through this area, it kind of looks like something should or would be proposed here. There are no new roads. So the benefit of this is that you will get 8 new homes without any proposed roadways. The infrastructure is there for both water and sewer, which we will access for this proposed development. We will also extend sidewalk. Sidewalk is not currently on that side of the road, and we would extend sidewalk along the frontage as well. There is 313 trees being proposed with this application. That's a combination of street trees, trees throughout the lots, and replantings in the area of clearing behind the existing home. There is, we met with your professionals in Ms. Spiro, and I believe we're in a situation where we do need to, well, I know that we need to plant additional trees, but I think it was the feeling that we didn't want to take more trees down to install more trees. So it was our opinion that we proposed the 313. That was what the site could accommodate, and that we would make the monetary contribution in lieu of the remainder to comply with your ordinance. With regard to stormwater management, each home will have their own recharge system. So the roof leaders from the home will go into an underground system, and the driveways will also be directed to a system. These all comply with DEP rules as well as Howell Township rules. They'll be on individual lots, and the maintenance of those will be the responsibility of a homeowners association to be formed for this purpose and the maintenance of these. So there will be no municipal burden with these.
And Walter, just focusing on the stormwater for a moment. Yeah, I know it is a concern out in this area of the township, as it is throughout the township in New Jersey. But just if you could inform the board on how this system would work, why this system is such a good system, and what it will do with regard to stormwater in that area.
So the majority of the runoff from what's being proposed will be from the roofs. They'll be collected right from the roof leaders from the gutters and directed into a series of plastic pipes that will be encased in stone. We've gone out, we've tested the soil, we've determined where the groundwater is, we've determined the rate at which the ground can accept the water, and all of that has gone into our design, which we presented to your professionals. There's also the driveways will be captured as well and put into a system, as well as what we call a rain garden, which is just a small depression which further enhances the quality of the water. We call it a rain garden. DEP calls it a bioretention basin. But again, we use DEP's rules for the design of these as well. There was a suggestion from Mr. Rizzo's office that the stormwater management measures be expanded to include any future development. So what we've designed the stormwater management systems for that you see today is the driveways and the home that's proposed, or the box. What Mr. Rizzo has suggested, which I think is a good forward-thinking suggestion, is that we assume that a pool will go in, some sidewalk will go in, a shed will go in, and that your ordinance 15% will be maximized. We're not proposing that this evening as far as that type of coverage, but I can testify that as a condition of approval, we would expand the stormwater management system to accommodate that. Our office has looked at that internally, and the site can certainly accommodate it. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's a series of underground pipes, and we would just add a few pipes to accommodate this additional future expansion.
And again, Walter, all of this would have to be maintained by the HOA, the homeowners, and everyone would be aware of these pipes and that they need to be maintained. Is that correct?
That's correct. As far as the presentation of the subdivision, it is fairly straightforward. It is an infill development, as Mr. Herbert said. The infrastructure, the roadway, the water, the sewer, and the other utilities exist, and we intend to use them. What's left is I believe, and your professionals hopefully will concur, are just requests for relief from your ordinance for your buffers. Your ordinance requires requires 2 buffers, 50 feet along all perimeter, which we do have. We just don't have along the frontage. And when a subdivision abuts an existing road, it requires 100 feet. So it's kind of the 50s within the 100, I believe. As Mr. Herbert indicated, we went through the exercise of reviewing that and analyzing what the impact would be. Because what would happen is the homes, as you see them, and the driveways would get pushed back.
And
So,
Walter, if you could just pull out a little bit so everyone can see the full subdivision and where the buffer is being proposed. Thank you.
so the buffer, the 100-foot buffer would go along Michelle Boulevard. It's not consistent with what's across the street. Michelle Boulevard does, if it does have it, it's not vegetated. So what we're doing is certainly consistent with the neighborhood. And if we were to utilize this 100-foot buffer, the homes would get pushed back, the driveways would get longer. Your ordinance actually requires that they get wider as well. So there would be additional impervious. And we calculated that an additional over 20,000 square feet of trees would be removed, which equals 111 trees. So it's our opinion that this is a better alternative, and this is what planning boards have been designed for, to allow for exceptions in if a good reason's been presented. And we will respectfully submit to you that this is a better design, and that the buffer ordinance, the buffer variance is warranted. We do have a professional planner that'll go into a little bit more detail of that, but that's kind of the engineering reason for why we're doing it.
And Walter, again, I'm not asking you to testify as a planner, but again, the reason we're doing this is is what we believe is a better subdivision. The ordinance has good reasons for it, for buffers, in order to protect various neighborhoods and so forth. But here, the argument is that because the houses are close to the street, which is in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood, that we're able to protect the environment, protect the neighborhood in a better fashion from an engineering standpoint.
That's correct. And for the board's reference, we proposed the homes at different locations to comply with the stormwater management and the grading. So we are 50 to 80 feet from the right-of-way, which is approximately 60 to 90 feet from the actual pavement. So it's not like we jam these up against the road. Your front yard setback in this zone is 35 feet. So we well exceed your setback requirement. It's just the buffer that we're struggling with. And outside agencies, we have Monmouth County Planning Board approval, and soil erosion is pending. I believe those are the two big outside agencies at this point. Should the board grant approval, then we would submit for water and sewer connections as well.
And Walter, just to emphasize the green area, the back, we're talking about the hash line in the back where the trees would remain. That's going to all be protected by a deed restriction. Is that correct?
We don't have that on the plan, but I believe it was raised by one of the professionals or maybe even the applicant as a good idea to ensure, because these are large lots, they're long lots, deep lots, I should say. And I think that would be a good suggestion so that additional unnecessary tree clearing doesn't occur. We could provide a conservation easement for review by your professionals.
And again, we have worked closely with the board's professionals on this, and we do appreciate all of their input. And they were very helpful in helping us to design this in a way that would make sure that the neighborhood was well protected and that we had a good product for the town. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Okay.
Anything further, Walter?
No, I'm open to any questions that the board or the professionals may have. I hope I touched on all of the points that your professionals have asked us to clarify. And I can submit to you that any of the technical comments in either your board planner or engineer's letter, we would comply with as a condition of approval.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the witness is yours.
Thank you. Not sure if anybody else on the board has a question, but could you point out with your pointer what you would consider the tree buffer, or I'm sorry, the tree line that would remain, and then the remainder of the tree line would be part of I'm assuming a deed restricted conservation easement?
Yes. So with this plan I'm tracing now, hopefully the board can see with.
Yes.
So this would be the tree line. There's an existing clearing back here, so it would follow that. Until we get to the.
Again, Walter, these are all trees that are there now, and the line follows what is open and where we're going to have trees. Is that correct?
Right.
Mr.
Actually,
Hopkins.
what might be a little better is if I go to the landscape plan.
I was just about to ask. Thank you. I'm sorry, Board Secretary, I apologize.
That wasn't me.
That was me, Shari Zero.
Sorry.
There's just, when you were just tracing that line, just one discrepancy we saw on the plan. It's correct on the sheet that you're on right now, but incorrect
yes,
on this sheet.
yes.
You see that square rectangle shape on the first two lots?
Yes.
That's supposed to be saved, but some sheets show it being removed.
We will, I noticed that too, and thank you for pointing that out. We'll clarify that on
will be
subsequent
saved.
submission.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for our attorney. The first rendition that they showed us, the color one, is that acceptable to put up for us to view, and plus for the people watching this to view? It's a lot easier to see, or since that wasn't submitted, we can't use it.
Well, we could use it, but it has to be marked in. So let's mark it in as a new
I think
exhibit.
that's much easier for all of us to see instead of looking at these.
I would agree. That would be A8.
A9.
A9, I apologize, A9.
And then if Mr. Hopkins could at least identify it with dates and names and whatnot for the record, please.
Sure. What I'm referring to is a color rendered version of the plans that were submitted to the board. The date of the plan, the exhibit that I'm referring to is August 4th, 2021. And again, it's a color rendered version of the site plan, of the subdivision plan submitted with aerial information superimposed. So this would be, this is much easier. I'm sorry?
Would you just make sure to send that to me, please?
I will.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does Ms. Bell?
Brian, before you go to Ms. Bell, I have a question.
Okay.
I had an opportunity to walk the site, actually with a resident that is the HOA president. And on the site, there is a strip of grass in front of the lots that they're proposing, that I was informed that was the previous HOAs. So can the attorney or the engineer, did they do does their survey show who owns that land, that strip of land, that your driveways would be encroaching if the actual other HOA owns that land?
You're saying that the HOA owns the land on the other side of Michelle Boulevard?
On the strip of, and again, this is what I was told, on the strip where the driveways are going to be encroaching. So from the curb to that strip of grass that's existing there now.
So, Mr. Nicastro, what I might suggest is, and this occurs sometimes, so there is an area between the curb and where the applicant's property starts. That area is the right of way. That's actually the municipal right of way. So some people, they see the curb and they're not really sure what happens behind the curb. So in this case, between the curb and our client's property is the municipal right of way. We did do a survey.
Because the HOA has been maintaining that and not the township.
Yeah,
Steve, can you chime in on this, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, without the benefit of having the title report and those types of things, I understand that the homeowner association from across the street claims to be maintaining that strip of land on the applicant side of Michelle Boulevard. The question is what is the legal basis for that? Were they required to do it as part of the original approval from across the street? And is there any agreement between the property owners across the street and the town requiring that maintenance, or is it just become customary? We don't know that. We don't know that as we sit here. I do believe there may be a representative of the homeowner association from across the street who intends to speak on that issue tonight. The problem is we're not prepared to really delve into it because we don't have really any of that information. So if Mr. Hopkins wants to talk about at least what he knows about the title, that's fine. But we still have to hear from, we will be hearing, I assume, from the representative from across the street.
And I also believe there's a stormwater catch basin at the corner of Michelle and Ramptown Greenville that the HOA owns as well. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of the HOA owning these entities. I do know that there's an inlet there. We wouldn't normally research whose responsibility it was.
Well, I'm sure that resident is on as well, so.
Okay.
I'm sure that what they have and what you have corresponds, or.
Sure.
We're talking about a drainage basin that is on the corner open space lot.
It's on Michelle and Ramptown Greenville.
Must be out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at it. I don't see what it is, but yeah, again,
And
maybe
my understanding is the HOA is responsible for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest, I'd like to hear more about it, but our client or the HOA, our client would accept that as part of this HOA's responsibility if it's on our side of Michelle Boulevard, both the mowing and the maintenance of that basin.
Well, the only question is if who owns it, and will you be impeding on their easement if it's the other HOAs?
Right. I understand your point. There's nothing in our survey of this. There's nothing for us to believe that this is anything but a municipal right of way. But if there's additional information, we'll certainly review it.
Just what raises my concern is that the township hasn't maintained it and has been making the HOA. And typically, if it's the townships, they would maintain it. So
right.
I think that's something we're going to have to investigate.
I can represent to you that we will maintain it. If we are approved here, we will maintain it. But we also have to make sure that we work it out with the other HOA as well. We don't want to impinge upon their rights.
You can maintain it, but if you don't own it, and they own it.
That's what I was just. That's exactly, and that's what I was trying to point out.
Okay, so we'll get to that. I don't want to be late, but we'll get to that.
But again, we want to be good neighbors, and we would maintain it.
Mr. Nicastro.
John, you calling me? Because I could barely hear you.
Can you hear me?
John, you have a lot of echo.
Volume in your mic is terrible.
I don't know what to tell you. Still nothing? Can't hear anything?
Try sitting back further from your mic.
John, we can hear
Yeah.
you, but it's very like, it's distorted. We can understand what you're saying, but it's very distorted.
Yeah, well, I have a couple questions too. As far as these recharge systems that they're proposing, collecting, can you hear me?
Can hear, yes.
Okay. Are we trying to suggest that there's going to be no runoff from those 8 existing, the new lots? There's going to be no runoff from the driveways or the sidewalks going into the street? Because there's an issue on Michelle Boulevard with their retention basin that's in the back of the property, of their property, that they maintain, like Mr. Nicastro is talking about, that overflows. It doesn't empty out. They have a lot of issues back there with the builder. So any water that's going to come off of these 8 driveways onto Michelle Boulevard are going to go into the sewer system and collect in their retention pond back there, which your people that are going to buy these houses are not going to be paying in the water till.
Well, Mr. Leggio, if I could for a second, let Mr. Hopkins answer the question on whether that is in fact the case. Will any of the runoff from this development run into Michelle Boulevard?
So the site currently does drain towards Michelle Boulevard. A significant portion of it does. And part of what we're required to do by your ordinance, which mimics the, and I don't want you to think that I'm giving you a fuzzy answer. I'll get to it quickly. But part of what we do to comply with your ordinance, which mimics DEP's ordinance, is we have to analyze the water that comes off of the site as it is today, and then analyze the amount of water that comes off of the site after the development. So what I can tell you is, no, I can't tell you that no water is coming off of this site onto Michelle Boulevard. What I am telling you is that we're reducing the amount of runoff that gets there today.
And can you explain how you're doing that, Mr. Hopkins?
Yes, that's through a series of recharge systems and inlets. So the roofs go in directly into the gutters, into pipes in the ground. And then the driveways have inlets as well. We're in a separate system that an inlet's like a drain, which collects the water from the driveway and puts it into a piping system under the ground, which then percolates into the ground, so it does not run off of the site.
So it's going to be, each home will have its own percolating system, or it's going to go into one main tank?
Each lot will have its own. Each proposed lot will have its own.
Just as a follow-up, how big are those tanks to maintain how much?
They're sized differently for each one. They are, I'm grabbing a scale here. If I'm probably going off camera. So generally speaking, the one for the driveway is about 15 feet by 50. And they're both about that size, about 15 by 50 feet. Underground, you won't see anything. It's plastic pipes wrapped in stone.
So for a layman, 15 by 50 would retain how many gallons of water?
It's not quite that, I don't have that with me. It's not quite that simple because we also use the stone for storage as well. If you'd like, when we take a break, I could get you that answer, but it's not something I have at my fingertips.
So in an emergency, because I'm sure your applicant is aware that the detention basin that's existing there now has failed. What would be the emergency backup should these systems fail? And the water has to go into the detention basin down on the other side of Michelle.
So we designed. I'm sorry?
Is the pitch that way that it would go towards that detention basin?
Yeah, the roadway, the Michelle Boulevard drains that way. So the natural slope of the land goes that way. So we designed for the storms up to the 100-year storm. So we have designed for those. In an emergency, they would, quite frankly, they would surcharge, so the water would come back out of the inlets over the grass on the applicant's property and then onto Michelle Boulevard.
Which is gonna create a problem, which they're adding to the problem that these people already have on Michelle Boulevard. So maybe this whole design needs to be redone, and you cut the road in off of Ranch Island Rockville, leave your buffers around the entire, existing properties, and put your own road in with your own catch basins, because we're gonna cause a major issue for people over here on Michelle Boulevard. You can't guarantee that water is not gonna come off these properties.
Is there any reason, Mr. Hopkins, looking at your, if you could pull up your topo plan, I believe it is. Sheet 5 of 11.
By the way, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if Mr. Leggio could also call in on his phone. That way we could understand him a little bit easier. I don't know if that's possible, just a suggestion.
It is possible he'd have to log out, log back in.
Well, I was thinking maybe he'd call in separately and just mute himself on his computer. I'm just trying to think of an easier way to be able to understand him.
See what the audio, how you change the audio settings.
Yeah.
If you go to Mr. Leggio, if you go to the little arrow that points up to the right of where you'd mute, click on audio settings. There's a slide bar for adjusting the volume of your mic. It may be that volume is too high and it's over modulating your voice.
Mr. Chairman, it sounds like you have some experience.
Sorry, the electrical geek in me.
I love it. I love it. I think we've all become electronic geeks with this pandemic.
It's definitely increased the curve, that is for sure.
Especially for us lawyers. I went to law school because I can't do this stuff.
Mr. Chair, if I'm figuring a few things out, I did have a quick question.
Sure, just a minute.
From my understanding, the recharge systems essentially operate the way a septic leach field would. It's not a tank per se, but it is a passive drainage back into the water table.
Is that right, Mr. Hopkins?
Yes, that's similar. The tanks are for elimination or reduction of the solids, and the fields are to let the liquid go into the ground. So it is similar, yes.
Right. So in this case, you're using just the field minus the tank.
Correct.
Okay, so Mr. Hopkins, in my opinion, it appears that water coming off of this property onto Michelle Boulevard is going to end up becoming a hot topic. So looking at your typographical lines there, it appears that in some instances, in most of them, you're actually increasing the grade up a little bit and back in on the side of the homes, forcing potentially additional water back out into Michelle Boulevard. Is there any reason why the grade couldn't be shifted so that the water drains towards the back of the homes and back into the woods? Is there a reason for how you've done the grading?
Yeah, because this is the way that the natural grade goes. So in order to shift the way, it's called bucking grade. So we'd be sending water where it doesn't go now. This site, for the majority of the site, drains towards Michelle Boulevard.
Is the applicant aware that the middle school south also has their own drainage retention pond that overflows on a regular basis onto Michelle Boulevard also?
I'm sorry, but I couldn't make out what you said.
We can't hear you, John.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
A little better.
A little bit.
just coming through really garbled.
Yeah, if you go back to that same upper arrow.
I did, Ryan.
There's something that says switch to phone audio. You may have to use your.
Switch to what?
Switch to phone audio. You see it?
Muting. It has no jack mic volume, that's all it's on here. I don't know. I'm not computer savvy. You still can't hear me?
We can hear you, but it's so loud. It's not, we can't understand you.
Is there a chat function that maybe he could ask his questions through the chat function?
No.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Mr. Leggio, I apologize. It's just, it's difficult.
And let me try.
Does anybody else have questions while we wait for Mr. Leggio?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions and some clarifications. First, I just want to clarify all of the variances that you're requesting. That you're keeping the variances for the two buffers, the 50 foot and the 100 foot. And then there's the variance with the fencing. Now you said you'll remove fencing within the site triangle. But I think that you still have a couple more variances. One is an existing fence that's actually outside of your right of way, and then you're extending that fence, so you're proposing a new fence outside of your right of way. Is that still your plan, or are you eliminating that as well?
I think we're eliminating that. Let me just make sure, and thank you for clarifying that. It wasn't just within the site triangles. It's our intention to eliminate these variance conditions.
You can see it here on Kosminski Way. At the very top, there's a proposed fence that extends off the existing fence. I think this is your existing conditions plan.
Yes.
So maybe on your site plan. Yeah, install 30 linear feet of chain link fence in addition to the existing. So is that still what you're proposing outside of the property line?
I think that's just to reestablish that fence, which is on the when the garage gets taken down. I believe it's the middle school or the school properties fence. So it would we can take it down, but it was our intention just to reestablish it.
Okay, so you're saying you're doing it for the benefit of the school, but
Yes.
I mean, I still think it would be a variance
Okay.
for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, we can get rid of it. It's whatever the board's, if it becomes a sticking point for the board, we whatever the board's pleasure would be.
Mr. Rizzo, if it's our decision, for me, I would recommend that if the school board requires it to be maintained, it's maintained. If the school board does not require it to be maintained, it doesn't need to be maintained, and the applicant should go and ask.
Yeah, and I think that also goes in line with the fence in the site triangle, which you can see on this plan too. That's the same fence line.
Yep.
So I think if you're keeping one, you're keeping both and vice versa.
You know, let the school make the decision.
Okay.
How's the school going to make the decision?
That's not for me to figure out. The applicant will have to figure that out, right?
We would go to the school and ask them for their what they want, and we'll comply with whatever that is. You can make it if you choose to act favorably with regard to our application, you can make it a condition of approval that we consult with the school and abide by whatever the school wants us to do with the fence.
And if they can't do that, Mr. DeCastro, they'll have to come back to see us.
We come right back to you because, we want to make the board happy.
They've only applied for preliminary subdivision approval anyway.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point. So when we come back for final, we'll have that addressed. If we come back for final.
Okay, and then it's also a design waiver for contributing to the tree fund as well. So that's one.
Yes, we realize that, and that's the board's discretion.
What does that mean, Mr. Rizzo? Because I was going to ask that question. Does it? I mean, they've got plenty of land to plant trees. It looks like.
Or Sherry, do you want to explain that?
Yeah,
How the tree
fine.
fund works?
Well, they could add more trees to these lots. The issue is they would just be going on homeowners' properties. And based on my experience, they don't always remain.
Well, what I was is they've already testified that they are willing along this proposed tree line. They're already willing to deed restrict them. Why can't they just add the appropriate trees where they've got extra land and then just put it as part of the deed restriction?
So you mean put them in the,
or do you think that contributing to the shade tree fund is more beneficial to the town? I'll leave it up to your professional opinion.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, just to let you know, we will do whatever your professionals and the board would like us to do with regard to trees. We can do either.
yeah, so Brian, you're talking about putting them in these backyards and then putting them in a conservation easement to include the forested area?
For example, look at the lots that are closest to Ramtown Greenville Road. There's where they've identified they're going to be putting the remaining existing trees into an easement, a deeded easement. There's a lot of land back there. Is that enough to plant the trees to meet the requirement?
So Mr. Chairman, just so I understand it, you would have us continue to run the line the way it's running behind the homes for those two lots and plant more trees in that area?
Well, those two lots are not showing correctly. So those first two lots, that rectangle of trees, that is remaining. That is a mistake there. So see in this picture, you see the wood.
Yes.
So that's that rectangle that was missing on the other sheet. So this is what currently exists. And it's kind of neat. You could see that there's more evergreens on the right side of the property than on the left side of the property. This is a winter picture. So you can't really just throw more trees in the treed area just because they won't establish in the woods like that. So we would have to put it in the light green area, which is just the homeowners' lawns.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now I see what you were trying to explain earlier with that line not being right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So your recommendation would be to contribute to the fund.
Yeah, I just feel like if you just add more trees to these, future lots, the chance of them staying is slim. People usually take them out to put in fences or pools or, whatever. I think it would be more useful if it went into the bank and could be used throughout the township.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I feel comfortable with your recommendations, Spiro. And my next question would be for Ms. Bell, I believe. What is the benefit? Why did the town create a 100-foot frontage buffer in the first place? And
I don't.
do you have an opinion on whether what they're proposing is in fact better for the town?
I don't know why the town created the 100-foot buffer. I think that the applicant has a planner who should provide some testimony as to why they think, the buffer is a better planning decision. So I'd like to hear their testimony before I give you my feelings one way or another.
Fair enough, thank you.
And Chairman, before Christine goes off, Christine, would you agree that the setbacks they're proposing versus the setbacks that are existing will change the landscape of the area that's existing now? Because the existing house, the houses there now are set back significantly. It doesn't look like that from the picture, but in reality, it is closer with the new homes to the street.
Right, so the homes they're proposing are closer than what is there currently.
So do you agree that that will change the scenic landscape of coming into this development from what the development has existing?
I believe
Makes sense.
so, that you're proposing more development than is there currently.
It's not the more, it's just that it's not gonna look the same when you come into this Michelle Boulevard, this development, where on the left, you got houses set back much further than houses on the right that are closer to the street.
Correct.
And I could understand their point
I
where they
don't,
want
I
to
don't
save
believe
more
that's
trees.
accurate, that there is a significant difference. Clearly from this plan, they're not set back. We haven't surveyed the homes across the street, but it does not appear to me that they're significantly different. They're in keeping with the character of the neighborhood.
But you have not surveyed the other properties to see.
No, but we're all looking at an aerial right now.
Yeah, I mean, I would, I think that there might be some on the other side that are a little bit closer. There might be some that are about the same. And then, there might be some that I think it's, a range. Based on
They're
this
certainly not
plan,
set 100 feet back with a vegetated buffer.
right,
I think we
based
can all
on this
agree on that.
plan, but it's hard to tell unless, you had measurements for both sides of the street.
But I do think, as Walter pointed out, that if you look at the aerial as it stands right now, and I mean, I'm just taking my pen for want of a better tool and measuring out just how far it is from the street. And you have the houses across the street. It's not that much of a difference. And those are the close houses. The further back houses, I would argue, are even further back than the ones across the street.
I do just want to point out also that the 50-foot buffer requirement is a township-wide zoning requirement, whereas the 100-foot is specific to this zone here.
Anything further?
House, can you hear me now?
Oh, much better, much better.
All right, Mr. Herbert, my question about these lot frontages, it's, not keeping in the same with the character of Michelle Boulevard, the existing houses that are there now. I understand this is, you guys had to chop this up to get, these eight units in here, the way you have it designed, but we're not keeping, with the same look that, the people on Michelle Boulevard, paid premium price for these lots and houses. And now we're going to change the aesthetics coming in off
Right.
Ramptown Greenville Road.
And that's a very good question. What I think our planner and, what the engineer has already pointed out, but you'll hear from our planner in a few minutes, but we're also preserving a lot of land out here. And that's why you have the smaller lots than the lots that are across the street. But I would also argue that those lots, even though they're smaller, they preserve a lot more land than the houses that are across the street, making for a more bucolic and aesthetically pleasing setting.
And let me ask you another question. The existing home that's on Ramptown Greenville Road that was built in the 1940s, the piece up by the Kaminsky Way. I know there's the agreement, you're taking down the garage because a portion of that property is on Middle School South's deed. But then you also have this chain link fence that goes all the way down Ramptown Greenville Road. What is that going to be staying, or that's coming down?
Walter, if you could just address that.
Let me get back to you on that.
On the plan, it looks like it's staying.
It's collapsed in a few sections. It's heavily wooded in the one corner that you're designated as, open space. But, as far as aesthetics, trying to improve this lot, maybe you guys should rethink this entire thing remove all existing buildings. And, you know, like I said before, without encroaching on Michelle Boulevard and causing a major issue for, you know, for the township for the future, cut your own road in and redesign your own little cul-de-sac with your own retention basin and, you know, move forward that way. Because these 8 lots on Michelle Boulevard is just not gonna, you know, not fare well for the people on Michelle. I'm telling you right now, they have already major issues with the retention pond.
So
And
let me
there's
ask, Mr. Leggio, let me ask,
Mr. Chairman, if I apologize, I don't mean to
well,
jump.
before you get into that, Mr. Herbert,
I just wanted to make.
I want to ask my
representation on
attorney,
the
I want to ask my attorney something. So just give me a second. Stephen,
Yes, John.
is the line of questioning that Mr. Leggio is stating in the way that he's stating it, is that appropriate for a board member to be concerned about the cost of someone else's properties and the properties there? Is that, I mean,
Well, I would, there's another way to look at Mr. Leggio's questions, is that because the applicant is seeking variance relief for certain buffers, including the 100-foot landscape buffer, there's a question as to whether the applicant could design this site to eliminate that variance that would also have less off-site impact on the neighborhood, which, and that is a valid planning concern. I don't believe Mr. Leggio, his questions, I mean, they could be interpreted as, are they going to impact the value? But we're not talking about that. We're talking about whether there's going to be an adverse zoning impact on the neighborhood, which includes homes across Michelle Boulevard. And the question that I think is a fair question is that the lot sizes and design on one side of Michelle Boulevard, it looks like what's being proposed is somewhat, it's a different look. And that's a valid planning issue as to whether this is going to be an odd streetscape. And again, the applicant they haven't completed their case, their planner hasn't testified. I'm sure they're going to be talking about that.
okay, great. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not getting the board in trouble, that's all.
I do think it's important to note, though, the applicant is not requesting any variances as they relate to the bulk conditions of the proposed subdivision. They don't need any lot area, any frontage. It's just that buffer that they need. That's the only variance they're requesting. So they don't, the lots as they're proposed are conforming with what's allowed there.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I can represent to you that structure that Mr. Leggio, through his dulcet tones, was talking about will be able to come down. And it's good to hear your voice the correct way, Mr. Leggio. And you're going to hear from the planner if we go ahead and do a cul-de-sac design. And again, that is a good that's a good point by Mr. Leggio. You know, when you look at this overall subdivision plan, that, hey, can we do a redesign on that? And that is something we thought about as well. So I think you're going to hear from both the planner and our engineer that if we do that cul-de-sac, it will cause a lot more coverage issues. You may have some bulk variance issues and so forth. And that we tried to design what would be least impactful upon the neighborhood. And I think what we have brought to you tonight, and again, you know, experts can disagree, but I think what we brought to you tonight is actually a better design because we preserve all that the woods there. Because there's a concern in this neighborhood about the water being absorbed by the land and so forth, and it's a legitimate concern. So we came in here and we said, all right, how do we protect the neighborhood the best way? How do we create something that looks good, that is bucolic and is appealing? And also, and create a situation where, everyone we're really just trying to create the best situation for an infill development. So yes, we could have done the cul-de-sac design, but I think the impact would have been much more severe for the neighborhood. And again, we would have to we would also have to create more bulk variances. But again, Mr. Leggio, my client would be glad to take down that structure.
Mr. Hopkins, can you point on the screen to the structure you're discussing?
I'm not sure exactly which one we're talking about.
It's the one down by the woods, Walter. the larger structure by the woods.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
I just don't, Mr. Herbert, I just don't understand why you're not clearing everything. You have a rundown 1940s, style farmhouse that's just, everything there is just all run down. The place is old, and you guys, bought the property. Your client bought the property with the intention of making a brand new subdivision. And, you're looking to, the client's looking to whatever, I don't know, cut costs or save money on not removing certain things, leaving certain things. And I just don't understand. We're trying to improve the area, and we're leaving structures up that are from the 1940s. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. That's all. That's the issue I have with leaving the structures up. You know what I mean? If you want to leave the 8 houses on Michelle Boulevard and then create your 2 lots on Ramtown Greenville, and then plant some more trees and some more nice open space, that would be a lot more aesthetically pleasing to driving by and heading into the schools on a daily basis than leaving this other stuff up. That's my only, my question. So, but, let your planner explain it to us. Thank you.
Sure. And we have somebody living there right now, and so you have a family situation. So the client didn't want to remove the house at this point, but it may be down the line that we are able to upgrade the house. But as of right now, it's just, given the family situation out there, it didn't work. But again, that's something we can talk about down the line. But again, very good point, Mr. Leggio, and I completely understand where you're coming from.
Gentlemen, I have a question. Down Michelle Boulevard, there's probably 6 streetlights. And I'm assuming they put them on the other side of the road because when they built the development, they didn't want them on the house side. What now happens to those streetlights? I think I count 6.
Walter, if you could address that.
Well, if the streetlights are within the right of way, they'll remain. I'm not sure specifically what the question is. Yeah, I'm looking at them now. They'll remain.
And I understand you're putting curbs in, correct?
Curb exists. We're putting in sidewalk.
Okay, so the street lamps would not interfere with the sidewalks being installed?
Correct. They'd be between the side. I'm sorry. Didn't answer your question very well. Yes, they will remain between, and they will be between the sidewalk and the proposed sidewalk and the existing curb.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So how can I have a few more questions for you as well? Just to clarify the deed restrictions, per the ordinance, the first deed restriction is for the proposed lot 2503, which is your open space. So
yes.
that'll be deed restricted for agricultural and conservation use. And then the second deed restriction is for each of the lots, the smaller lots, and that they won't be further subdivided in the future.
That's correct. We would agree to that.
Okay. I believe you mentioned that all of your drainage systems will be the responsibility for maintenance for the HOA, and that's all the rain gardens and all of the underground systems?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. The driveway locations, are those going to remain through plot plan stage? I know the houses might, change in size or move a little bit, but it looks like the driveways are set up right now so that, the rain gardens are based off that, and the grading is based off where the driveways are. So any relocation of those or changing of sizes might, impact the drainage. So would you agree to keep those in place?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And yes, we would agree to keep the driveway locations as they are approved.
Okay. And just to, Mr. Rizzo, just to point out is with regard to the conservation easement on the individual properties, that would tie in with the grant of the variance to the buffer. So just so we're clear on that.
Okay, and the last thing I want to just explain for the board is Mr. Hopkins agreed to provide the stormwater systems to have enough capacity to hold up to the 15% impervious coverage. Right now, I think they're proposing about 5%. 5% for each lot. So this means that in the future, if anyone comes in and builds a patio or a pool or shed or anything like that, they don't have to go ahead and redesign the stormwater for each and every lot. This will pretty much be three times the size of the current impervious on the plan. And that way, in the future, if any homeowner wants to build a patio, they can do that. And then if they need to exceed that impervious coverage, they'd have to come before the board, at which point it would be reviewed again.
So if I understand you right, Mr. Rizzo, the design has provided stormwater management that's larger than they presently require?
The current plan provides stormwater for what you're seeing right now. They agreed to provide or to increase the size.
Got it.
Based on the max permitted in the zone, which is 15%.
Got it. Okay.
I have a question about these rain gardens on lot 2506 and 07. Are those open catch basins or is that a basin that's open, or is that's depicted there, or is that something that's underground?
So the rain gardens are above ground, above, they're depressions. They're small depressions.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Like a retention
With
basin.
vegetation in them that help to absorb, specifically to help to absorb and cleanse the water.
So it's basically a mini retention basin on those two properties.
Yes, except there's no outlet there. So the water goes in, it holds the water and goes into the ground and has to drain out within a certain period of time so it doesn't stagnate.
Yeah, we don't have standing water for a period of time, right, Walter?
Correct.
Yeah.
So there is a structure in those though, where it's designed to infiltrate, and at a certain elevation, it will start to spill over, and then it'll drain towards Michelle Boulevard.
Thank you.
I had a quick question too. What kind of costs is the HOA looking to set aside for this recharge system? You only have 8 houses in this HOA, correct?
Correct.
That's correct. I don't know if the 9th house would be included in that. My guess is maybe it would be, but that's all part of a stormwater maintenance manual that Mr. Rizzo's office has required us to do. And that's something that gets generally finalized towards the end. And part of that is an estimate of what the construction costs and the maintenance costs would be. And that's put in a document that has to get filed actually with the county as well.
Okay, it just seems the cost would be pretty significant. You only have 8 houses. I mean, was there ever a thought to maybe work in conjunction with the existing HOA, because you're also using their access road, right?
I don't know that we have done that. It doesn't, I'm not sure that we're there yet. It's certainly something that could be considered. We'd like to present to you that we can do it on our own. And if there's some cost savings that can be accommodated, we'd certainly be open to that.
Right, because I think the current HOA would have to probably pay for the snow plow of that particular road. I mean, it kind of seems a little murky to have a whole nother HOA when there's one existing there and then there's only another 8 houses being added to it.
Well, if the HOA is paying for snow plowing, there's certainly, and I don't know, we don't have this as a private right of way in our research. But if they do, they're entitled to be reimbursed by the municipality. So they shouldn't be incurring that cost by themselves.
I believe the township plows Michelle Boulevard now anyway.
Yeah, I would expect that they would.
Yeah, but the township's not responsible for maintaining the retention basin. That's the big issue here. So all this runoff that's eventually going to make it to Michelle Boulevard is going to be the issue of the residents of Michelle Boulevard, not the new 8 people that are going to be moving in. That's the main concern here with this runoff. Even though they're trying to do their due diligence with these recharge systems, I understand that's a great idea and trying to keep the water away. But the natural pitch, removing all those woods, raising the elevation, you don't have to be an engineer to figure out the water's going to go to Michelle Boulevard. So we're talking 5%, 15%, future patios, future sheds. There's just no way the water's not going to make it to Michelle Boulevard and just create a massive new problem added to what they already are dealing with down there. So who's going to be on the hook for that? Those people that pay those association fees, or they're going to go to the town and complain to our engineers, and then when the township's going to have to address it. It's just just some of this doesn't make sense to me. That's why I'm so concerned with it. I'm very familiar with this area. I have a landscaping business. I've done a lot of work in this area. And that's why I see the runoff. I see the issues they have already back there. And it's a nightmare for them back there when we get these heavy rains. So I just wish we could address it a different way.
Mr. Leggio, that we are acutely aware of those issues, and that is why we're not proposing what is required, but a lot more. You know, this is a max system. This is something that we are proposing, as you heard from the engineer, that it is a system that will do the maximum that can be done with regard to stormwater out there. And I think an argument could be made that it will not increase any runoff onto Michelle Boulevard at all.
Well, that's your opinion and that's their opinion, but that doesn't mean that that's actually gonna happen. And if we really were concerned about the residents on Michelle Boulevard, maybe the whole, like I said before, redesign the entire plan to make it your own cut in, your own cul-de-sac, redesign everything, make the lots smaller, so you still get your 8 to 10 lots, whatever this is allowed to be. And we leave the people on Michelle Boulevard alone, leave the buffer there for the wildlife, leave the buffer on Comiskey, the back of Kaminsky, and a lot more people will be happy with this than with this current plan.
So I would suggest that the natural grade is always going to go towards Michelle Boulevard. We do have an alternative plan. It does not include a cul-de-sac, but it's a compliant plan that eliminates the need for the request for relief from your buffer. So cutting in another, I would suggest that cutting in another cul-de-sac, significantly increasing the tree clearing and impervious, and the water's still going to go the same way. The water still has to go to Michelle Boulevard. That's the natural grade. So we can cut in another cul-de-sac, we can put in another detention basin, but our outlet's going to be in Michelle Boulevard anyway. So we're going to have the same issues, just on a larger scale. So that's why we've proposed this along Michelle Boulevard, reduce the amount of clearing, reduce the amount of impervious, and put small stormwater management measures on each individual lot rather than one big one. And we feel this is a much better alternative.
Any of the other board members have any other questions?
Hey, Brian, I know this is an engineering presentation, and it may be completely the wrong time, but I have some, and I don't even know if there's an environmental person that's going to testify tonight, but I do have some concerns with the environmental status of the property. And I don't know if Walter could provide some answers or if this is the right time.
I can tell you our office did not prepare it, but I know that a phase 1 was submitted, and with that there was no recommendation for further investigation, and that was submitted to Mr. Rizzo's office.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on that, Walter. I'm looking at the phase 1. As you know, I sit on the Environmental Commission, and I've reviewed it, and there are certainly recommendations for further investigation based upon the findings of the site. Secondly, the Environmental Commission requested, because there was a phase 2 investigation done on the site, we requested to get the data, to review the data. We've never seen that. Reportedly, there's been some historical issues on this site with filling the property. Monmouth County was involved, Howell Township was involved. There was a mystery tank that was removed in 2004. There's no write-up on that. There's no sampling data attached to that. You know, there's reportedly asphaltic material throughout the site, another filling material issue, car parts, staining noticed, motor oil discharge. As the Environmental Commission liaison, I have some major concerns with the site, not seeing or being provided with anything to review prior to this meeting. So I just wanted to put that on the record now.
Okay, our office did not prepare that, so I can't speak to it with all due respect. We did submit it, so it should have been provided to you. I know it was available for public.
We'll let Mr. Herbert respond.
Sure. Yes, and I know Mr. Azar, you said you had it in front of you and you're reviewing it. And we will, Mr. Azar, I can assure you that, look, we're building houses out here. We want to make sure that everything is environmentally copacetic. We want to make sure that no one would ever be injured by any of the issues that may or may not be out there. So whatever we need to do, we will make sure that property if further cleanup is needed, we will do it. We'll make sure it's taken care of. We're here for preliminary tonight, and it's something we can look into further if we come back for final. But again, we want this property as clean as you want it.
To your knowledge, has a phase 2 investigation been done to date? Because they did recommend it in the phase 1.
Again, that it was not something that was prepared by Walter's office, but that is something we can check into and report back to you on.
Okay. Any other further questions? Seeing none, Mr. Herbert, your next witness, please.
Brian, is there any way you could open it up to the public for the engineer?
Oh, if you think that there's a benefit to that, Mr. Nicastro, I have no objection to doing that. If you want to do it engineer by engineer on this application, you want to do it at the end.
I just know that I think the board president from the other association, when I look up participants, is on. Maybe he could add some value.
I just didn't know if, before we do that, I just didn't know if hearing the planners discussion would be prudent first.
Maybe.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I can assure you that the planner's testimony will be fast.
Okay. And then what's your third professional you're going to be? What is theirs?
We only have two, Mr. Chairman. I also have with us the representative of the applicant, Aaron Munster.
Okay, got it.
So is Mr. Osceola going to testify now?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Osceola, I'd like to swear you in. Mr. Osceola, do you swear from the testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
And can you please give us your business address for the record?
It's a 125 Half Mile Road, Suite 200, Red Bank, New Jersey, 07701.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Osceola.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert.
For the benefit of the board, if you could give your educational background, by whom you're employed, and how your expertise is before this board.
Absolutely. A phone consulting group based in Red Bank. I have a master's degree in city regional planning from Rutgers University. That degree was granted in 2005. I've been a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey since 2008. My planning experience really, ranges the gamut from master planning to redevelopment. On the public side as well, I've been on the other side of the table on many occasions over the years. I've also provided testimony on applications like this on many occasions as well. I've appeared at the planning and zoning boards here in Howell, and I've also appeared on hundreds of occasions at planning and zoning boards in 18 counties in the state of New Jersey as well.
Great, thank you. We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Osceola, I know you've had a chance to review this application, and I know that you and I have spoken about that the main issue here is the buffer and the variance needed for the buffer. So if you could offer up some testimony as to why the board should grant a variance for the buffer for this application.
Yes, absolutely. So, just to begin, I would just like to say that, from the planning standpoint, typically, there are applications where, we have an issue with the buffer, like we do here. But in this instance, this is a situation where, non-compliance with the buffer is actually a better, planning alternative. And I know that Walt had talked about that in his testimony, but I'm going to give you kind of the planning flavor, from my perspective, why I think what's proposed is a better planning alternative. Of course, this is a permitted use. We are here at the planning board, the governing body, by virtue of the zoning designation has found that, what's proposed here, meets zoning requirements. So of course, yes, we are a permitted use. As Ms. Bell had said earlier, we don't require any variances from the bulk regulation. So we meet all of the requirements relative to the lot area, to the coverages, to the setbacks. So we are a clean application from that perspective. Of course, we are here because we don't meet the buffering requirements for 50 feet and 100 feet. However, I believe that, as you heard from Walter, what's proposed is actually a better planning alternative. And from a planning perspective, and I'm not going to verge over into the engineering perspective because I'm certainly not an engineer, but I think Walt has teed it up properly for me to give my opinion as a planner. From the planning perspective, we try to design, or we give our advice during the design process, to ensure that what's proposed works better, not just for the immediate neighborhood, but also for the community. I believe that if we actually did comply with the 100-foot buffer requirement on Michelle, that will result in more impervious coverage. That will result in more destruction of woodland. That would certainly result in a situation that isn't as bucolic as, in my opinion, as a planner, this plan proposes. So I think from that perspective, what's proposed is a better planning alternative. I mean, we are proposing, to preserve, more land by virtue of this application. I'm not going to get into, stormwater management issues because that's not my expertise. But I think as Walt had said, what's going to happen here is that it's going to actually, not create a situation that's going to be worse, for the municipality. So I think what's proposed here, in the general sense, from the planning standpoint, with the rain gardens, with all of the recharge pits, et cetera, as proposed by Walt, certainly fits into a situation that, when we look at it in the general sense from the planning standpoint, makes a lot of sense. So, with that said, in my opinion, this is a better design. I believe that Ms. Bell had made, or there was a question that was posed to her earlier, relative to the consistency with what's proposed this evening with the houses that are on the other side of the street. I believe that, and I think it is pretty clear, Walt, if you can just pull up real quickly, please, the rendered aerial site plan. I have a bit of a delay. Okay, there it is. I think it is pretty clear, even though we don't have the exact measurements of the setback from Michelle. I think it is clear that what's proposed is generally consistent with the character of the area. I'm not going to say it's entirely consistent. I mean, there are, of course, some houses that are closer than others, but I think what's proposed relative to the 100-foot buffer requirement is generally consistent. And I think it is quite clear from this aerial as well that none of those houses meet that 100-foot buffer requirement on Michelle as well. So when we look at the consistency of what's proposed with the character of the area, I believe that from a planning standpoint, we are generally consistent. Walt, if you can you please remove? So with that, that's the which is known as the positive criteria. Certainly, as the board is aware, there are purposes of zoning from the MLUL that I believe that we do advance. That's criteria C, light, air, and open space. Criteria G, that's the sufficient space and appropriate locations. Of course, this is a permitted use in the residential zone. And as you saw, and as you're aware, no variances are required from the dimensional aspects or the bulk requirements in the zone. So certainly think those purposes of zoning are advanced. Excuse me. So that's a positive criteria. For the negative criteria, the first prong is a showing of whether or not the granting of the variance will present a substantial detriment to public good. Again, I don't see that happening in this application. This is a permitted use. As Walt had testified, there's substantial landscaping that's being proposed with this application. By virtue of not complying with the 100-foot buffer, there's preservation of more woodland. As Walt has also testified, there's sufficient work that will be done for stormwater management to not create a situation which will have a negative impact on Michelle Boulevard and the houses that are on the other side of Michelle as well. So certainly what's proposed, in my opinion, the granting of the buffer variances do not rise to the level of being a substantial detriment. And one thing I want to make clear is that, of course, I think two reasonable people can disagree.
Justin, I apologize. If you go back to your last sentence, you just froze for a minute.
I'm not sure where I left off, but
when you were
I was saying that
to say you had a conclusionary statement you were about to make.
Okay, so two reasonable people, can disagree whether or not there's any impact or any detriment for any land use application. That's exactly why the law says that it must be a substantial detriment. In this instance, even though that there may be some board members who may feel that what's proposed may have some detriment, in my professional opinion as a planner, I certainly don't see that the granting of these variances would contribute to a substantial negative impact to the public good. Lastly, just to conclude, the second prong of the negative criteria is a showing of whether or not there will be a negative impact to the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. Again, as I had stated, the governing body, by virtue of having this proposed use as a permitted use, I certainly don't see a negative impact to the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. That concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Osceola. Mr. Chairman?
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for this witness? Otherwise, we'll open it to the public.
I do, Mr. Chair. Mr. Osceola, just curiosity, and every time I see the aerial, I look at it more. And talking about, planning and keeping with the aesthetics of the neighborhood, I keep looking at it and it seems to be that it's almost a 2.5 to 1 ratio to what you guys are proposing to what's across the street. Do you feel that that is substantially consistent with the neighborhood?
Would you mind pulling that up as well, please? So, sir, I think your question is the ratio relative to the amount of homes that are proposed on the north side of Michelle versus the amount of homes that exist on the south side of Michelle? Is that the question?
I understand that it's virtual and it's a depiction, but to me, one side looks very dissimilar from the other. And I got to be honest, it visually doesn't characteristically make sense. It doesn't seem congruent to me, and that's maybe more fact.
Yeah, so I think I got everything you're saying. I'm having a bit of an internet issue on my end, but to answer your question,
Justin, just if I could again, it's 8 homes on the north side, 5 on the south side, so it's 8 to 5.
Correct. And from the planning standpoint, we believe that what's proposed is a better plan. Not complying with the buffer requirement is a better planning alternative in my professional opinion, because we are retaining more woodland. We're reducing the amount of coverage. If we had to extend those homes back and comply with the coverage, we could, be by right. We could come into this board and we have a conforming application that will meet the code. So I think, what's proposed here is a better planning alternative relative to 8 homes versus 5. I understand your point, but I still think that the aesthetics here, being a permitted use and having homes that will be aesthetically pleasing, and also with the street trees that are proposed and the other beautification, I think keeps with the nature of the area. So I respect your point, sir, but I respectfully I would have to disagree that the 8 versus 5 will create a situation that will be deleterious to the community.
And Justin, just also, there is an open space lot on each side of the 8 homes, correct? As you can see, right?
That's correct. That's correct. So as you can see in the area,
we could spread these homes out further and they would be much closer to the 5 homes across the street. Is that correct? But we would eliminate
absolutely
open space.
Absolutely.
It wasn't necessarily a agree or disagree question. I just wanted to hear your opinion on the aesthetic decision, because I find it strange, but my opinion doesn't necessarily matter to that end.
Yeah, I mean, I think, sir, what we're dealing with here is a situation where the applicant, has, worked with the township and its professionals to develop a plan that just makes sense in the context of this overall site. And by virtue of having, as Mr. Herbert had said, the open space lots to the north and to the east, I think we're balancing a lot here, to create a plan that just makes the most sense, and quite frankly, from my perspective, makes the most planning sense. So we could, this in my opinion, and this was my advice throughout the course of this application, to stick with this plan, because I felt that this works with having the preservation of the open space lots, trying to ensure that we don't take down more trees by complying with buffer requirement and adding more coverage. I think that this just works the best in the context of the site and the surrounding area.
So,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Kristen.
Sorry, just to reiterate, I think for the board again, this subdivision application is conforming to the bulk requirements of the ARE2 zone under the open lands designation. So they're required to set aside at least 50% of the proposed area for open space, which to be preserved, which they are doing. And that's why they're allowed to create these smaller lots, which do conform to the requirements of that open land subdivision. The only variance they're seeking is for that buffer along the frontage. So the board ultimately needs to decide if they think it's a better planning alternative to allow the homes to be closer to Michelle Boulevard, or if they need to be set further back from the road. That's really the only variance they're here for tonight.
And again, I don't want to put words in Ms. Bell's mouth, but we have this condensing of the 8 lots, again, to preserve the land all around it. So while it may not be in perfect symmetry with the houses across the street, we are preserving a lot of land to maintain the bucolic character of the neighborhood. Again, not to speak for my planner, Mr. Osceola, but I think he will agree.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Plus, my wife is a planner too, so I get this stuff drilled into my head all the time.
Any other further questions before we open it to the public? Okay, seeing none. Let's open it to the public. Eileen?
At this time, the chairman has opened the hearing up for members of the public. Anyone wishing to ask questions or comment on this application, you need to use the raise your hand feature. You'll be brought in one at a time. You will need audio and video. You will be sworn in and need to give your name and address. If you're calling in, you can use *9 to raise or lower your hand, *6 to mute or unmute yourself. And the first person being brought in is Dave Eskenazi.
How you doing?
Good, Mr. Eskenazi.
Okay,
Could
my
you
name,
please state your name and address for the record?
sure,
And if you're going to be providing testimony, our attorney will swear you in.
sure. My name is Dave Eskenazi. I live at 8 Michelle Boulevard. On your map there, number 9 that you've been working off of all night long. I'm the fourth house on the bottom left.
Mr. Eskenazi, do you plan on providing testimony this evening, or do you just wish to?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you some testimony. So
Oh, then I'd like to swear. Yes, thank you. Mr. Eskenazi, do you swear affirm that the testimony provided before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
All right,
Mr. Chairman, would you like us to put the colored rendering back up for Mr. Eskenazi?
please.
Walter, if you could do that? Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna have to use my phone here because I can't share my screen to you guys. If you could all look on their proposed property lines, you see how their property line on the front right corner over there against Ramtown Greenville Road and where Michelle Boulevard cuts in. You see the gap all the way to the right? So you see the property line as it cuts across. When we purchased these homes 7 years ago, our properties extended across through Michelle Boulevard as part of the ARE2. When we closed on all of our mortgages, Ryan Homes made us deed that part of the property, the 5 feet on the other side, to the HOA. I have here in my hand, I can't give it to you guys, I can probably email it to you, showing, if you see, that's my house there, and it butts right up across the street through Michelle Boulevard. And technically at that time, I owned the circle and I deeded it to the HOA, which the HOA now owns the circle. So the HOA owns the 5 feet across the street, which you guys would like to cut through. That's not township property. It might be township right-of-way, which every single block in every single town has a right-of-way on every sidewalk that you walk across is technically a township right-of-way. 3 feet back from every sidewalk is a township right-of-way. So that's the first thing, right? So we have that. Next, are you aware that our HOA owns our retention basin and all the sewer lines that run into it? Mr. Herbert?
I'm not aware. I'm sorry?
I was speaking to you.
Oh, I apologize. I am not aware of who owns the sewer lines.
Okay, we own the sewer lines as part of the HOA. Mr. Mauer, Joe Mauer, who will be on shortly after, he's our president, and he'll attest to all the parts that we own. So the front sewer drain, which you guys
let me ask you this: were the sewer lines ever turned over to the township, or was there any type of?
No, they're all controlled by us. We maintain them, we clean them. It all goes back to our retention basin in the back corner.
I think, Ms. Eskenazi, you're using terms interchange. I think you mean the storm drains, not the sewer drains.
Correct.
Not your toilet sewer. Storm.
Correct, the storm drain. So the storm drain also in the front.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To clarify earlier, there was a question, the storm drain in the front corner in front of lot 25.03. There's this little small storm drain area there that flows into the storm drain area in front of the middle school, which we share, and then theirs flows into ours. So as the property sits now, where it's all dirt, right? No impervious areas there, anything. How can you guys swear that your retention basins that you're gonna put in on each house not hold back more water than what we have now. As it is, 100-year storms that you're planning for happen currently every year. And this block does flood quite often. We've had at most 3 feet of water flooding the entire street. And very often we have at least 6 inches every time it rains hard. We can't control the water here as it is. So how can you stop the water from going forward? Nothing?
It's somebody's phone keeps dinging, so it's a little difficult. Anyway, Walter, can you address the stormwater question?
Sure. We previously indicated that the site currently drains towards Michelle Boulevard. That part of our analysis, we submit a report and calculations and analysis to the board's professionals, which has indicated that we not only reduce, but we significantly reduce the post-developed runoff. That's in conformance with the municipality's rules as well as DEP's rules.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to disagree with your calculations because I live here and I see exactly what goes on.
Have you reviewed our calculations, sir?
No matter what your calculations would be, there's no way it's going to ever stop the water coming off.
Nobody has ever indicated that the water would stop.
Okay, so it's just going to add to our problem then?
No, the rate of runoff will be reduced.
You just said it won't stop. How's it not reduced? It doesn't come out of that property currently. It stays in the wooded area and it goes back into the wooded area.
It does run.
Building up houses, right? You're going to have to elevate the ground to build the houses up so they all have basements. So you're building up property. You're now going to slope the properties back out towards Michelle Boulevard.
As it currently goes.
Correct. So there's no way you're going to stop more water from coming towards Michelle Boulevard with your stormwater management.
Never said we're going to stop the water.
Okay, so then you concur with me that water will be coming out on Michelle Boulevard. Thank you. Next.
I've said that several times, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so next, is the board aware that the property owner here also owns that scrap of land to the east over there, right between Western Drive and Rutgers Drive? So that property owner also came before the board. I used to live on Rutgers Drive, and they came well before Michelle Boulevard was ever even a blip on the map to build that block. And for 10 years, that has been sitting as a mound of dirt and a weed stomp pit. What can the board do to prevent the same exact owner from creating that pit that's there now over here in front of our house? What's the recourse?
Do the professionals or the attorneys want to answer that question?
Sure. First of all, it's not the same owner. With regard to our site, and it's all we can focus on here, we will be providing a construction schedule to your professionals if we're granted both preliminary and final. We will adhere to whatever schedule that is. And again, work closely with professionals to make sure this is carried out. It is in the interest of our client to get this development underway and to have these homes ready for sale, as soon as reasonably possible, because you can't make money if you don't have a house to sell. So they are going to proceed and they'll work with the professionals to make sure it's a schedule that everyone can live with.
All right, one of my last questions here is, what's the hardship here to create 8 houses? Why not create 4 like what we have here?
Well, again, I think as you heard testimony from both the engineer and the planner, we looked at the overall zoning. We chose the open space part, or for want of a better term, a clustering way of doing it, so that there were most of the site, a lot of the site was open space, and that it then worked with having the 8 lots close together to make the whole site work so that we could provide a lot of open space on the land and maintain, you know, the bucolic character of the neighborhood.
So why can't you do that with 5 houses instead of 8?
Well,
And make it conform to our block?
we would argue that it does conform because we are offering up a lot of open space. Actually, we would argue that with all the open space, it's actually better than what you have there now.
You have approximately 3 houses to my 1.
No, I would disagree with you, but I understand where you're coming from. But again, we went with the open space. We are complying with the zoning out there. We're not asking for any extra houses. We're asking for what this type of zoning allows for this kind of situation. And we're also proposing a supermax stormwater system to make sure that the neighborhood is protected and this property is protected as much as possible.
All right, and what about our circle, that part of my property that I deeded to the HOA? Are you guys gonna have to tap into that circle? Because that's where all the utilities and everything flows through. All the stormwater, everything goes through that.
I am not an engineer. Walter, can you address that?
I'm not sure what you're referring to with the
the
circle.
left of my
There's
house.
right there. There's utilities in Michelle Boulevard that we'll be accessing.
All right, I'll leave all the rest of the questions to Joe Maurer. He's the HOA president.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Esposito. Eileen,
I'm bringing in Joe Maurer.
thank you. Good evening, Mr. Maurer.
Mr. Maurer, do you propose offering testimony this evening or just asking questions of the applicant and its witnesses?
Testimony.
Okay, I'd like to swear you in, please. Please raise your right hand. Mr. Maurer, do you swear from that the testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes.
Can you please give us your address for the record?
It's 31 Michelle Boulevard.
Thank you very much.
So I just wanted to, Mr. Esquenazi kind of touched on a lot of the points I was going to talk about. I could just go in a little more depth on them. We could start with that property line. I'm trying to get the.
Do you want us to put up the color rendering, Mr. Maurer? You're muted, Mr.
You're
Maurer.
muted, Mr. Maurer.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, if you could put up that rendering.
Thank you.
So you could see on the corner of Michelle and Ramtown Greenville where it kind of widens out there. Mr. Nicastro actually talked about that catch basin. It's not a retention basin like you would imagine holding water. It's actually a catch basin entryway to the stormwater system that has large riprap rocks there. The reason why the town has us maintaining that and that is part of the HOA is because when the neighborhood was built, the town made the developer basically take ownership of all stormwater management. The town did not want any input with the, shouldn't say input, but they didn't want to take any responsibility of the retention basin that we have in the back of the neighborhood or any of the stormwater facility that we have. So that's why that we own that little strip of land. In some cases, I believe on that corner, it's around 10 to 15 feet. Smaller sections about 5 feet. And the driveways actually do encroach on that. So that drainage system is the reason why we own that sliver of land, and Michelle Boulevard wasn't the property boundary there. And as far as the drainage goes, all of the stormwater systems run on Michelle run to the basins. I think one of them is over by Middle School South, and then there's a further one down behind all the way at the back of Michelle. That one is constantly filled with water. When that was designed, it was supposed to be a dry basin. It was supposed to percolate down. There's no outflow structure at all there. Since we've lived here for 7 years, that thing has been dry maybe 4 days out of the whole 7 years. We've had major problems with that. We're still in talk with the developer trying to settle. The town still holds the bond on that because it is a failed basin. And these 100-year storms that we get every year now completely fill that basin up, and it's a complete failure. So now by putting more homes there that's going to have runoff onto Michelle, now it's impeding on our stormwater system that doesn't work as it is now. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
This is Steve Tom Black. I'm the board attorney this evening. Can
Yes.
I ask you a question?
Sure.
When you say that the HOA, your HOA, owns a 5-foot strip on the other side of Michelle, meaning the applicant side of Michelle, can you tell me where you think the extent of that 5-foot strip starts and ends?
Well, you could see right on the left-hand side where that circle is. You could see where it actually goes off the roadway. And like Mr. Eskenazi said, he was supposed to, if you looked at the original maps when he bought his house, his property line actually extends with the lot number and block number, actually extends across that circle, across the street, right to that edge of that corner, and cuts off on his other property line. And he was correct. He did deed that over to the HOA to maintain, because it didn't make sense for him to run his lawnmower across the street and mow, a small area. So the HOA actually maintains that.
And does that, Mr. Mayor, does that ownership continue all the way to Ramtown?
It does.
Okay. Now, I mean, I have to ask this question. Is it your position or your homeowner association's position that the applicant appearing this evening does not have frontage on Michelle Boulevard, does not have frontage on the road, but has effectively your strip lies between the applicant's property and Michelle Boulevard?
Yes.
That's a very interesting thing to know.
It's not the only frontage they have is on Ramtown Greenville.
Okay, sorry to interrupt your testimony, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Herbert, I know you're kind of hearing this for the first time this evening, but this is a pretty important point that the homeowners across the street are making. And I'm not putting you on the spot now, but this is a very important point. If you're asking for effectively home frontages on Michelle Boulevard, we need to know, the board needs to know whether you have the legal right to have frontage on Michelle. And again, I'm not putting you on the spot tonight, but that's something the board we need to nail that down.
Of course, Mr. Timberlake, and I understand exactly where you're coming from. I'm a board attorney for many towns, and I've asked that same question. We would argue that we do have access to the road there. If any of our driveways are going over, the wider portions, look, there's an easement there for access, but anything that goes over the wider, we can always move the driveway. That's not a big deal. But if we were to be granted preliminary, of course, that is something, as you said, we have to nail down, and we would, to make sure that it is corrected if we came back for final.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Mayor, please proceed.
Okay. So as far as the drainage goes, we have a failed basin as it is. And any more runoff that we're going to have onto Michelle, which now we're going to have impervious structures with the driveways and potential patios, is going to create more runoff, and it's going to put more of a strain on already a failed basin. Just last week, we had a rainstorm. We had probably 2 inches of rain. It wasn't anything crazy. We've had a lot worse, but that basin that was adjacent to these homes and at Middle School South, at 7 o'clock in the morning, I was driving by and it was completely overflowing into the outflow structure, which actually drains into our back basin that we own, and it's a failed basin. So, that's our big issue is we're stuck with this basin that doesn't work as it is. We're paying $80 a month in HOA fees just for that basin. We have no amenities whatsoever. We have an HOA just for a basin, and that is currently doesn't work.
Mr. Mauer, can I ask you just a quick, I'm just trying to ask a question for my own knowledge here.
Sure.
So the
Sure.
basin in the back, that's back, I guess, by your house when you
Yes.
go back. You know,
Yep.
I got the Google map up here, sort of an elongated basin, you know, where Michelle Boulevard kind of does the loop.
Yep.
And you're living back there. That basin is malfunctioning. That's what you're saying?
It's I couldn't hear you. What was it?
That basin is malfunctioning?
Yes, it's supposed to be dry, and
And
it's
do you know if the HOA is engaged in litigation with the builder on that?
we are in talk with them. We're not actually in litigation in court. We're trying to settle it out of court,
Understood.
but we are, yes.
So, you know, there's a dispute, and I guess the argument would be is that the basin has some type of an impervious surface below it that's stopping the water from infiltrating down?
Well, this is it goes real. I mean, this is very lengthy discussion with this basin.
No, we don't want to go there tonight.
Yeah. The DEP and the EPA, the federal and state DEP, both mandated that it had to have 6 foot of topsoil because of some endangered flower in the woods. That's why we it's not draining properly, because they mandated it.
Okay.
So it's never going to drain.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay. So, you know, aside from the drainage that we own, it's encroaching on our you know, what we pay for. Now, you know, as you've heard, this is a private HOA. We have, you know, bylaws, and it does in fact disrupt the character of the neighborhood. I mean, we're talking the lot frontage sizes. We have 200 foot where we have 4 houses. There's 8 houses going there. And some other board members made a good point, and it doesn't look right. It's very odd looking. It just doesn't go with the character in the neighborhood. We weren't allowed to have the same color siding if we lived across the street from a house that had that color siding. But now we're going to have homes designed by a different builder, and it's going to completely look different than our character of the neighborhood. Completely disrupts the character of the neighborhood. And now, you know, we're talking 8 homes. You figure on average, each home has 2 cars per house, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. So we're talking at a minimum 16 additional cars traffic-wise in a 200-yard span on Michelle. We love to ride our bikes. We all have young kids. They're running around playing all the time. We're talking, you know, 16 to 24 cars potentially. And that little section, that 200-yard section, is going to be completely dangerous now for any bike rides or family walks in the street. So with that, that's all my concerns for right now.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to have Walter put up the tax map so we can try to address this frontage issue a little bit more.
Okay, please do.
Thank you. Walter, please proceed.
Is that an exhibit? Is that going to be a new exhibit that we need to?
No, it's part of, I believe, of the preliminary subdivision plans. That is sheet 1.
That's correct. It's the cover sheet of the subdivision plans. Let me try to get there. Thank you all for your patience, but I know this is something that's important to everybody.
Especially the attorney. We want to make the attorney happy here. Okay.
So our office did prepare this survey. I don't recall any issue with regard to a private easement, but this is the tax map. This is Michelle Boulevard. In my opinion, it's clearly shown as a municipal right-of-way which connects to Ramtown Greenville Road. And we're, you know, our subdivision is in all of the driveways front on Michelle Boulevard.
Okay. Thank you, Walter. Mr. Chairman, I believe Mr. Eskenazi is putting up his hand.
Yeah, if you don't mind, if you could bring your tax map back up again.
Sorry. Quick on the trigger there. Sorry.
If you look at your bottom left corner there in front of Ramtown Greenville Road, you'll see the offset of Michelle Boulevard, but you don't see the offset of the property lines that we showed you. You see how the road curves there a little bit?
Yeah, that's on your side of the road?
So if you can zoom into that little corner, please. Okay, you see the offset of the road width stays the same. The front drainage that Joe was speaking about earlier, that the town wanted nothing to do with, is in that front corner right to the left of where it says R equals 15 feet. Right there to the left of your cursor, right to the right of your cursor now. To the left of your property line, correct. So on our thing, I can't really share it. It's lot 2602 that we deeded. I'm trying to put it up to my screen here. It's lot 2602 that we deeded to the house on Ramtown Greenville Road.
Yes, sir. That's on the others, that's on the opposite side of the roadway.
But if you see the part, that part 2602, that little bit contains a piece that we deeded to Ramtown Greenville Road to that house, and the other piece that we deeded to the HOA. So you see how your piece is straight, your piece of property is straight, but yet Michelle Boulevard curves. The width of Michelle Boulevard stays a constant. So the drainage in the front, you're not showing there on the front. The road actually curves there. It's not a widening road.
Well, this is the municipal tax map, and so it's on the other side of the road. So I'm really not quite sure what your point is.
This map is not showing the border of the actual road.
Right. So now if you go back to A9.
Yeah. Mr. Eskenazi, while the plans are being shown on the screen, can you tell me approximately when the Michelle Boulevard subdivision was approved by this board?
I moved here, let's see, in 2014, and they started building this in, I'd say, 2012.
Okay. And so what you're saying is that notwithstanding the tax map that we're looking at right now, that you're saying that the homeowner association's land is not depicted accurately on this tax map?
Correct. Well, you're not seeing that drainage area that Joe was talking about that the town wanted nothing to do with.
Right.
But drainage is not shown on the property lines. This is the area that he's referring to, and it's on the opposite side of the roadway.
Right. But
no,
I just wanted
that's not what I'm referring to.
Yeah, because Mr. Maurer, I asked Mr. Maurer if looking at this tax map now, it shows that the applicant's property is like it's a rectangle. Is what you and Mr. Maurer are saying is that you believe that the homeowner association owns a strip of land to the right of the Michelle Boulevard right of way, so it's sandwiched between the applicant's property and Michelle Boulevard?
Correct. If you go back to A9, their overall map will depict exactly what we're saying here, that we own that piece. And Ryan Holmes strictly, it was very explicit when they told us that when we bought the houses. One of the reasons why I chose this property, I was the first one to build on this block. And one of the reasons why I chose this was because they said that we own the first 5 feet across the street and nobody would ever be able to build there. The worst that could happen is somebody would build in the middle of the lot and we'd have a 50-foot buffer. And look, we're good with them building, just not on our block. Let them build their own block. We're not fighting them building.
Mr. Eskenazi, do you have any documentation that would state what you just said that Ryan Holmes told you?
It was all in our mortgage and when we bought the houses, whatever items that we deeded over to them in the beginning. It would all have to be through Ryan Holmes. You'd have to dig it out of them. But I have the map here.
Right, but do we have some type of documentation showing the meets and bounds for that area?
I mean, I have this picture here. If you want me to text it, or maybe I could email it to Eileen here, and she could have it.
You're saying it's depicted on our plan. Is this one of the plans that depicts the strip that you're referring to?
Correct.
So again, I would suggest that the strip that Mr. Eskenazi is referring to is actually the area between the curb and the municipal right of way, which is very common in roadway design. It's not the,
So-
it's not the homeowners associations.
And Mr. Chairman and the board attorney, I would also argue that if there is an issue with this strip of land, that's really a quiet title action. It's really not in the jurisdiction of the board. That this would be something, and again, this is something we would try to nail down before final. But really, that this is it's a quiet title action and not a land use action at this time.
Mr. Herbert, I mean, I have to respectfully disagree there.
Yeah.
If, and again, we don't have the title, we don't have the surveys, we don't have the documentation but assuming for purposes of this discussion that the homeowner association across the street is correct, that they do own a strip of land, then that's not a quiet title action. That's a significant issue as to whether you have legal rights to even have access to Michelle Boulevard.
Right.
So again, that's not going to be decided tonight because we're not.
And that would be something we would have to try to nail down.
Yeah,
but I mean, there are.
And also, if I can end this argument right now, I'll have to be honest with you. In my personal opinion, I don't think that we're going to bring the application to a vote. And here's the reason why. I mean, Mr. Husser said earlier, I mean, if you go to the Phase 1 environmental report, there are several significant recommendations from this environmental company about looking and doing further investigation on underground storage tanks, testing soil for possible contaminations because they saw staining. Mr. Husser, am I reading this right?
Yes.
So I don't know how we go to any vote at all when we have potential environmental issues on this site, along with possible deed issues.
Yeah, and Brian, on top of that, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I don't know how you can grant preliminary with this issue, and the environmental is a complete unknown right now. What if we uncover something? There's certainly warranted further investigation. Based upon the results of that investigation, I need that information. I cannot vote based upon this today.
Understood. And Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that we have hired on the Atlantic Group to finish up the environmental investigation. I was going to argue that can be a condition of approval. That's the way it's normally handled. But again, we want this board to be comfortable. We want you to be comfortable as the chairman. So that is something that we can talk about addressing.
Yeah. For me, it's a big issue, especially being near other residential homes and a school.
Of course. And look, we're building homes out there. We want it to be safe as well. It's in everyone's best interest that both the title issue and the environmental issues be solidified. And again, we can work with Mr. Rizzo's office with CME to make sure that they are satisfied as far as the environmental issues go, and as far as the survey issues go, and have assurances to bring back to you.
And Stephen, am I off base in making that recommendation? I think this application has heard the public testimony. We'll wait to see if there's anybody else in the public that would like to speak. But I don't think we can come to a vote on this right now. I think there's too many unknowns.
No way.
Again, I mean, the environmental issue, that's a separate issue aside. My concern is that the legality of connecting to Michelle Boulevard. Before the board votes on this, we need to make sure that the applicant has those legal rights without requiring an easement or some type of authorization from, I mean, the tax map doesn't show it, but we really need to look at the title and look at the deeds to see.
I agree.
What
absolutely.
Again, it's too important of an issue to just punt for a deal with it at final. I mean, it's too important.
Okay, so Mr. Herbert, if you don't mind, we'd like to see if there's anybody else from the public or Mr. Mara would like to finish his testimony.
Sure, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mara, do you have anything further to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch back on that the tax map, what Mr. Eskenazi was saying. He when that picture was up with the tax map, it doesn't depict Michelle Boulevard in that strip correctly. It doesn't even show the boundary of the roadway. It's showing the property line of this lot, but it's not actually showing the roadway.
And we all on the board agree with you. So
Okay.
the applicant has to go back and do their homework.
Okay, thank you.
Just to be clear, tax maps don't show the paved right-of-way. They're not intended to.
Right.
And our plans also depict the right-of-way on both sides as the tax map. I understand we need to prove this to you, but I can tell you on my side, there's nothing here that concerns me. But we'll provide the board and your professionals with the information that they can be comfortable with. And quite frankly, the homeowners across the street can be comfortable with as well.
Anything else, Mr. Maurer?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Eileen, is anybody else from the public raising
Yes,
their
I
hand?
have two others. Ed Vanga. Actually, there's three others.
We've been sitting here for about 2.5 hours. Does anybody mind if we take a 5-minute break?
Your lips to God's ears, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Thank
The
you.
board will take a 5-minute recess. They'll be back at 9:28.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Steve, what do we want to do with time?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
The next application, I don't know how involved it is. But I'm not familiar with the board's policy on when you don't start a new application or when you stop that type of thing.
I mean, even if we got through another 10 or 15 minutes, I'm not sure how far we're going to get.
Perhaps.
Do we want to ask the other attorney opinion of what they want to do? I mean, I don't particularly want to be here till midnight.
Sure. Who's the attorney for Pioneer is the attorney for Pioneer at Howell? Oh, it's Sal Alfieri?
Alfieri, the famous Sal Alfieri.
Sal, you've been watching the proceedings. You see the clock. You see where this is going. What do you suggest?
Well, if it depends. If you're going to break at 10 o'clock, then it's not likely we're going to have more than 5 or 10 minutes to present. If you're willing to go past 10, then we would go as long as you allow us to go. So it's really up to the board on how late they want to stay up tonight. And I've enjoyed watching Mr. Herbert all evening. So it was.
I'm glad I'm entertaining you, Sal.
It's up to the board. I'd be willing to go to 10:30, but that's as far as I could probably stand. My eyes are already heavy.
If I can throw it out there, we don't have another meeting in November. December 2nd, we already have 4 applications on the agenda, and December 16th, we have 2. So there's not a lot of room to put this application. So it's up to you.
Could use some input from the board.
You say you. Who's you, Eileen? Me or the board?
The board.
Okay.
Well, Sal,
I'm out of it. I did my best.
Sal, what do you think in terms of the testimony, the time it'll take you to put the application through?
Well, we have an engineer, we have a traffic engineer, we have then we have an architect who will be brief, and we have a planner who would be brief, but we do have 4 witnesses.
Oof.
So yeah, it's not like if we get started by 10 o'clock, it's not likely we're going to finish by 10:30. But we're willing to go as long as you allow us. If you allow us to start, it's up again. We defer to the board completely.
I'm okay with having the application start as long as it sounds like the applicant's willing to do so. How's the rest of the board feel?
I agree. He's been here waiting. He has his professionals waiting. We should at least give him the opportunity if he so desires.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that being said, we've got everybody back. Mr. Dorado? Don't see you.
I'm here.
Mr. Leggio, are you on?
I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
We have Mr. Vanga is in already from the public.
Please continue, Mr. Vanga. Would you please, Steve, could you swear him
Yes,
in?
Mr. Vanga, do you plan on asking questions or offering testimony this evening?
Questions this evening, sir.
Just questions? Okay, please proceed then.
Okay, cool. I'll try to make them fast. Thank you.
Oh, and Mr. Vanga, if you can give us your address for the record.
Sure. I'm Ed Vanga, 46 Michelle Boulevard.
Thank you very much.
Yep, I'm also a member of the Board of Directors for the Homeowners Association. So my partner has already asked a bunch of questions. I just want to get clarification on two quick things. It sounds like for the deed and title issues regarding the property across the street from the four houses, the front car neighborhood, the board or the applicant is on the hook for following up on those items. Is there any other information other than I believe Mr. Maurer might have emailed the document? Anything else required from us as a board to be provided for that?
Well, you know, it really depends. I mean, the board and it's the professionals, the board and the applicant have to review the information and determine whether or not the applicant has legal rights to front on Michelle Boulevard, to have vehicular access crossing from the applicant's property. And we really need to decide that before we reconvene. So
I think
whatever paperwork you have, please provide it to the board and to the applicant if possible.
Yeah.
So we can study it.
Thanks. I understand that we have the ability to provide exhibits. I just wanted to make sure there weren't any mandatory ones that we were missing. I'm just checking a box.
By the way, Mr. Venga, you've got the coolest virtual studio of any person from the public I've ever seen.
They're all real, I promise. It's not a
I
Zoom.
love it. I love it. It looks great.
All my neighbors want me to play you a song while I'm sitting here. All right. Second question, if we're good. The original issue was the 100-foot buffer. That was I think the original question here. Can we revise the 100-foot buffer from the street, assuming that that property is not owned by our homeowners association? Who can provide clarity on the original context for that 100-foot buffer? Is that something that would be researched by the board and contained in the previous meeting minutes from the original subdivision of our neighborhood? Because I'd like to know the context behind the original buffer above and beyond the 50 feet that's traditionally recommended in the township. And I'm not, as a citizen, entirely sure how to gather that information or whether or not it's my responsibility to provide that.
Well, our professionals want to handle that one.
I don't know, Christine or Jordan. I mean,
Yeah, I believe Miss Bell spoke about that before.
I guess if I could volunteer to say you'd want to go back and look at when the original ordinance was written, and if there was any commentary, that would have to be something that would have to be coordinated with the town attorney, through the planning board attorney. Not to give Steve any further work, but that is something he'd have to research with Miss Bell to figure out. I mean, I've written many ordinances similar to this, and usually you have some planner memos on it and things like that the town would have.
Yeah, that's my question, right? Because the property, I'm sure there was a discussion before this board prior to the development of our units, and that accommodation, or I guess the extension of that buffer, was intentional. It was not.
Well, you got to remember that the buffer, it's an ordinance that goes throughout the township for the 50, and the 100 is in this general area, but I don't know if it was specifically focused on your one development.
Gotcha. That's what I'd like to get to the bottom of, and obviously we can do our own research. You guys do this every day. This is our first or second time through this, so I just wanted to make sure that we were clear, and I guess requested the board clarification on that for the next conversation.
Mr. Vega?
Sure.
I might be able to help on that. If you go to that section of the ordinance, it might help read, just to see what it says. But I think it really is, the main purpose of it is to save more wooded area as well as have the appearance of woods. So if you had a rural property, and like the typical rural road with trees along the side of it, if you're going to develop it but want to keep that look, the homes would kind of be tucked behind the 100-foot buffer. So it isn't, Michelle Boulevard per se. It's just that the developer has that option in this zone that they could cluster the homes and give, or I'm sorry, the option is cluster the homes, or you have this big buffer along the road.
Right.
I did go out and meet with the engineer, and we did look at what's in that first 100-foot buffer just to see if it would be helpful, for the new property owners as well as the existing ones. The first half of that buffer closer to the main road is really overgrown with vines and whatnot. So it didn't really have anything worthwhile that nobody would want in the front of their yard, because of what's currently there. And then the buffer heading down Michelle is very open. There's no real understory over there. Wanting to save more trees, when we were out there, it just seemed like pushing the homes closer and not having that buffer, we'd save more trees that are better behind them. So the nicer woods are further back. So if we push everything further back to have the 100-foot, you'd end up taking more of the better trees out and leaving the junkier ones by the road.
Yeah, and again, we would be glad to be compliant, but then we would be taking out what are some really nice trees that Ms. Spiro pointed out to Mr. Hopkins and his company. And that is why that's why we're asking for the buffer. Again, we can be completely compliant and just push the houses back, but that would be destroying some good trees back there. And like Ms. Spiro, I'm a tree hugger. You can ask my wife. I never want to take down any trees. So, we're trying to spare the trees, good trees, as much as possible.
Cool. Thank you both for your answer. So we'll investigate the specific ordinance. I'm assuming no one on this has it readily available when that ordinance went in, or what the meeting date was where that was decided, the original 100-foot buffer.
I don't know that.
Okay. We'll have to do some research on that one. Okay. Number.
Go ahead.
Yeah, could someone from the applicant team provide details into what is planned with the remaining structures? It was mentioned several times, the bucolic look of the neighborhood. I hardly know of a person who would refer to what's happening on Ramtown Greenfield as particularly bucolic. And if you look at your site plan, the aerial shows about 12 cars currently parked in the driveway and subsequent areas around the home. Is the plan to keep that residential structure as a home and adjacent garage? Or is it going to be continued to be used as a rental property as it is today? Or is there some other plan that's part of this larger site plan?
Well, right, as was testified before, the out structures are going to be taken out. The home is there. There's a family that lives there, and there are no long-term plans as of right now. That is something that would have to be developed as time goes on. But the home would be kept there, for that family that lives there. So that again, the rundown, the fall down structures will be removed.
Gotcha. So the two homes that are currently there would not be changed. They would stay as is. It would be the rundown structure, the old chicken coop, and I believe it's now turned into a garage.
Yeah, I believe there's one home, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's one home and what appears to be a larger or a smaller garage. The big one's in the back.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then, I'm sorry, I'm trying to move quick. Last one I had, I know stormwater has been a very enthusiastic topic for the evening. Can you state
for every application these days?
Can you state for the record what the actual tolerances are for the system you have for failure? Some of the other folks have said the 100-year storm. I believe you used a supermax term. Can you elaborate a little bit on the specifics of the type of inflow for stormwater that particular structure or that design would have? Is it meant to resist a certain amount of rain, or is it a every blank year storm? I'm not sure of the terminology, but what are the specifics on that particular system?
Walter?
So the municipal ordinance, which mimics DEP's rules, requires us to analyze the 2-year, the 10-year, and the 100-year storm. So those are statistically the frequency. I see you nodding your head, so you've probably heard this before, but just for the record, those are statistically, those storms occur once every 2 years, once every 10 years, once every 100. So the rules require us to reduce the rate of runoff from our site after development for 50% of the 2-year storm, 75 for the 10-year storm, and 80% of the 100-year storm. And just to clarify, the post-developed, I'm referring to the post-developed.
Yep, I'm familiar. We're again dealing with our own issues with our own basins. I'm familiar with
You have become a basin expert thanks to your wonderful basin by your house.
Regrettably so, sir. Regrettably so.
Yeah.
And my last question is for, I believe it's Mr. Hazar. He's the liaison from the Environmental Board. Does the Environmental Board and I believe there was like a phase 1 and a phase 2 assessment include research into protected wildlife and fauna, flora and fauna, like as part of our original, I think Joe mentioned it, some of the issues we've had are regarding an endangered plant. Does the assessment that is provided by the applicants cover whether or not this protected plant exists on the property?
So that's kind of outside of a phase 1, phase 2 assessment. So a phase 1, phase 2 is basically, seeing if there's any impacts to the soil, to the groundwater, to the sediment. Right. It's kind of outside the scope to really get into the bugs and bunnies, as I say it. But that does get in an environmental impact statement or something along those lines, which I believe was completed for this project. I don't recall anything.
Mr. Hauser?
Yes.
I think we should let Mr. Rizzo, our professionals, answer how the
sure
typically that stuff gets.
That's fine. I directed the question to the wrong person. Go ahead.
Yeah, that is correct. The township does have an environmental impact statement requirement, which has been submitted, and the ordinance outlines all of the criteria that goes into that. So that has been submitted. We reviewed it. I think we have one comment left on it, not to that effect, but it is something we have reviewed.
So just deer, no swamp pink. Okay, cool. That is the rest of my questions for today's session. I thank you all for your time and for grinding through this with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Van Gogh.
Thank you, sir. You don't want to rip into some Born to Run for us?
Here, I'll give you the Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Elaine?
I have Jeff Hanlon.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm down in Florida right now, so I was walking around Disney trying to listen to half of this, and I'm just hoping
Mr. Hanlon,
okay.
Can you please give us your street address for the record?
Yeah, sure. It's Jeff Hanlon. My address is 40 Michelle Boulevard.
And Mr. Hanlon, do you plan to offer testimony this evening or just ask questions of the applicant and his witnesses?
Both.
Okay, I'd like to swear you in then. Can you please raise your right hand? Mr. Hanlon, do you swear from any testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you so much. Please proceed.
Sure. When we built the houses back in late 2014, as it was mentioned before, there is an area that is across the street from the 4 first properties as you come off Ramtown Greenville Road. And currently I'm looking at a map that was prepared by Cranmer Engineering. It's originally dated July of 2009. It was last updated in April of 2014. There's actually a monument that is placed that's identified on the map, and it's on the other side of a small catch basin as you come in off of the site triangle on Ramtown Greenville Road onto Michelle Boulevard, clearly indicating where the property in question does end. And I know it's been brought up by, I think, the board's attorney that the applicant does not have frontage on Michelle Boulevard, which would impact the legalities of actually putting fronts of houses on the street. And I think that's a valid concern and a strong concern. I think that I've seen other plans where there is a cul-de-sac built. Obviously, it's been mentioned before with a different question, but the developer doesn't make money if they don't sell houses. This all comes down to money for the developer. They don't want to make an environmental impact, but I would respectfully argue that then build one house if you don't want to make an environmental impact. Build 2 houses if you don't want to make an environmental impact. Why build 8? You could build 7. You could build 6 on a cul-de-sac, and it impacts less trees. It doesn't mean that you have to have the frontage of the homes on Michelle Boulevard and cutting into our HOA property. And then also, obviously, it's been brought up as well. Someone for the applicant brought up that there are 5 homes on Michelle Boulevard that would be parallel with the 8 homes. There's only 4 homes on Michelle Boulevard that are right there that are going to match up with the 8. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio. There's a house on Ramtown Greenville Road that's Sebastian Woodworking. He's not part of Michelle Boulevard. He's on Ramtown Greenville Road. On Michelle Boulevard, there's only 4 particular houses that actually run from the end of Sebastian's property up to the circle where Dave Eskenazi already testified he lives. They're proposing 8 homes. That is not within the spirit of what the design of Michelle Boulevard is. I mean, we all purchased these homes specifically to have a larger piece of property. There's only 23 homes. And it doesn't really, fit within the landscape or the frontage of any of the properties that it's opposing. So I just want to know if the board has, had any concerns or questions or thought about redesigns of this to not allow the frontages to be on Michelle Boulevard and rather, have the applicant go back with less than 8 houses, make 7 houses or 6 houses with them building their own street that's cut into Ramtown Greenville Road.
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. Any other questions?
I don't think I got an answer.
Oh, well, are you asking the board to answer your question?
Yeah, I'm asking the board if anybody has asked the developer to come up with a plan that's less than 8 homes so that there is less of an environmental impact if they do not have frontages on Michelle Boulevard.
So the professionals, do you want to handle that one?
Mr. Hanlon, I'll answer that. Right now, I mean, the job of the Howell Planning Board is to review applications that are submitted to it, to review them for conformance with the ordinance, and then to look at the neighborhood and what have you. So it's not the job of the Howell Planning Board to redesign a project for an applicant. Right now, the applicant has come in with this 8-lot or 10-lot subdivision fronting on Michelle, where the 8 homes, new homes, would front and connect to Michelle Boulevard. The issue, as you've heard this evening, is whether that is possible, whether that's legally possible. Assuming it's not legally possible, then the applicant would have to go back to the drawing board and then come back and present something that it can provide and it can legally offer to the planning board. Again, the planning board is not in the practice of designing on the fly. We don't do that. We review what's presented to us, and what's presented to us this evening fronts on Michelle Boulevard.
But wasn't there a second design that was floating around in paperwork where they did have a cul-de-sac that came off of Ramtown Greenville Road?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Hopkins, during Mr. Hopkins' testimony, he said that there was an alternative design that he was involved with, but we haven't seen that this evening. It was just mentioned in passing.
Okay.
So it was presented to your professionals.
Okay, so the board was presented with the alternative design.
Not the board. It was presented to the board professionals.
Okay.
The alternative plan is part of your site plan set or subdivision set, Mr. Hopkins.
No, not the yield plan.
Not the yield plan?
No.
Okay.
No, there's a separate plan that we can discuss. Or I actually have with me this evening. It might be a little late to pull it out, but it's something that we can refresh with your professionals and maybe go over the merits of it with given the board's input. I think would be very valuable.
But first, Mr. Hanlon, was I able to answer your question?
You were, yeah, and that's what the gentleman who just responded had advised that there is a separate plan, and from the documents that I read, it was pulled off the table with the frontages going on Michelle Boulevard because of the environmental impact. So I wasn't sure if that plan could still come to fruition with just less homes to still have the less environmental impact as well as not impacting Michelle Boulevard and have the best of both worlds.
Mr. Chairman, do you want us to answer that further, or?
Yeah, I think is the answer yes, you will look into that?
Yeah, that is something we are going to look into. Again, Mr. Chairman, we want to nail down the access issues, the title issues, as well as any environmental issues. We are hearing from the public, from the people who live along Michelle Boulevard. They are asking good questions, and something that we may want to consider, and I don't know how the board feels about this, but maybe having 6 homes on Michelle and moving 2 out to Ramtown, Greenville. That's something we could talk about. But again, I don't know if you want more driveways along Ramtown, Greenville. That is something we can talk about with professionals. I don't know how the board feels about that.
So if I could make a recommendation, it sounds like first of all, you need to figure out your legality first.
Of course.
Right. And let's say you prove out that you're legally able to get right to Michelle. Sounds like you have a good neighbor discussion. I mean, all of the neighbors here, I believe, have presented well. They have all offered good questions and are amenable to having conversations and discussions based upon what I've seen so far. My recommendation would be first find out the legality and then maybe have a good neighbor discussion.
All right, and does the Mr. Chairman, I don't know, do you or any of the board members have any view on moving the lots around like I just talked about at all, or?
It sounds like legally you have a right to do whatever you want. You may not be able to take advantage of the cluster rule anymore if you start losing.
That's something we're gonna have to track down. But again, we want to work.
I'd recommend, any revised plans, obviously, we would see them and we'd like to review it for how compliant it is before.
Yeah.
But just to touch on what Mr. Hanlon was referring to was, and I know there's some discussion about reducing the number of houses on Michelle, and I know Mr. Esquinaza stated that as well. But I think that what Mr. Hanlon was referring to was an alternate plan with a separate roadway coming in off of Ramtown Greenville and a cul-de-sac, so there's no homes on Michelle Boulevard. Ms. Hanlon, is that correct?
Yes, that's the plans that I originally had seen. And the backs of the properties would back up to Michelle Boulevard and wrap around to Kozeminski Way so that there was no frontages on Michelle Boulevard.
Right, and again, that was talked about in a preliminary fashion, but it does cause a lot more in the way of disturbance. You lose a lot more trees. And again, we never had a cul-de-sac plan. That plan never existed. But if we were talking about doing something like that, you would have a much larger impact upon that property.
But in all fairness, the professionals don't live on Michelle Boulevard, right? These residents do. So I think their input is to me, it's weighs a little more heavily than what the recommendations are from our professionals.
And their input is important to us as well. We really do want to be sensitive to their issues, and that's why I was talking about maybe having 6 lots there and moving 2 out to Ramtown. But again, if we go with the cul-de-sac, it is our view, it will have a much more severe impact upon the area and the neighbors on Michelle, because you'll lose a lot more trees and you'll have a lot more issues.
Right, but you're also not burdening their already overburdened stormwater management system.
An argument could be made that it would make it even worse.
If you'll let us know what you come up with.
Okay, but again, I think that it is our professionals, and I think some of the board professionals as well really wanted to be able to save as much land out there as possible, and that's why we came up with the design we came up with.
Understandable.
Okay, Mr. Hanlon, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I thank you for your time. That answered my questions.
Okay, you're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, and by the way, Mr. Hanlon, please have a good time in Disney. I haven't been there in a couple of years, but I do miss the place, so have a good time. Mr. Chairman, if I could ask you, if the homeowners, especially Mr. Venga, Mr. Maurer, Mr. Hanlon, and Mr. Esquinaza, if they could provide to the board secretary their phone numbers or ways of us getting a hold of them. That way, we can talk to them and try to go over this.
Mr. Hanlon, is that acceptable to you?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So if Mr. Hanlon and the other members of the public, if you could reach out to the Howell Township Board Secretary and just provide them with contact information, if you want to be part of this, we can surely reach out to you.
Thank you. Eileen, do we have anybody else?
I have one more, Bill Ransom, who's already brought into the meeting.
Okay, great.
Hi, for some reason, my video is not coming up.
Okay, Mr. Ransom, do you intend to ask questions or offer testimony before the board this evening?
Just quick questions.
Okay, so please give us your address for the record.
34 Michelle Boulevard.
Thank you, Mr. Ransom.
My first question I had was, I'm not sure if this, falls into the affordable housing plan that Howell Township has, but if anybody could elaborate on that.
Ms. Bell?
I don't believe this falls into the affordable housing plan.
Okay. Is it because there's not enough homes in their development, or?
No, this is not a designated site in the plan, so they would have to pay a development fee to go into the trust fund. But this site would not be generating any affordable units.
Okay, thank you. Second question I had was, is there the homes that are proposed to be built, not sure if you're proposing with basements or not, or the elevation in conjunction to Michelle Boulevard. So I guess, Mr. Hopkins, is there a elevation plan at this point where the top of the driveways would be in conjunction to Michelle Boulevard?
Yes, we have a grading plan. It varies. I'm just looking, one of the driveways is approximately 3 feet above the roadway. Looking at another one, another 3 feet, looks pretty consistent to be 48 to 52. That one's 4 feet, 3 to 4 feet higher.
3 to 4 feet higher. And is the driveways single car driveways or double car driveways proposed?
It's a side entry garage, so it'll be a single driveway leading to at least 2 car garage.
Okay, and at the end of the driveway where it would meet the sidewalk, is there a proposed grate or anything, or to catch the water before it comes down the driveway, or are we just going to collect all the water off the driveway onto Michelle Boulevard?
So we've been through this several times. There's inlet grates that do catch the water from the driveways and take it into underground systems.
Okay, that's kind of leads me into my last question would be maintenance. So if that grate clogs up, because it's a wooded lot, that grate's useless. If gutters on these homes clog up because of lack of maintenance, your recharge system is useless. So how in 2 to 3 years of homes being built and going through 4 seasons, do we expect homeowners to just maintain their properties and not let it go so that your proposed system is actually even working?
If I could answer that, and then Mr. Hopkins, feel free to jump in. It is why you have an HOA. The HOA will have rules about maintenance and so forth. If you do not comply with those maintenance requirements, the HOA would have the right to go in there and do it themselves, as well as fine the person who's non-compliant.
Mr. Hopkins, you testified that the HOA will be responsible for maintaining them completely, correct?
That's correct.
So the HOA will be allowed to go on their neighbor's property and clean their gutters?
Oh, gutters or drains?
Well, both. I mean, so technically off your roof line is your gutters. So if your gutters are clogged, the water that's supposed to go down your gutters into the leaders and down into these pipes in the ground into a recharge system. That's how it flows. If your gutters are clogged, where's the rainwater go? Right over your gutters, right onto the property, which then is going to seep down into Michelle Boulevard.
Right. Well, again, as everyone knows, if your gutters are clogged, not only will it cause what you're talking about, or it can cause that, but it can also destroy the home itself, and that water would go into the walls and so forth. So, again, it would not behoove any homeowner to leave their gutters clogged. And if they were to do so, the HOA would have a right to fine them for not complying as well.
Yeah, but you're also going on the assumption that people actually do what they do and there's nobody that goes into foreclosure and they could care less. So, I mean, we're all going in the assumption that, the HOA is going to follow up and take care of everything. And
Well, that's why you have an HOA. And
Yeah.
if they don't comply, they can be fined.
And the township will fine them when our road floods.
Again, your ordinance does not allow for us to make further contributions to the flooding. And if we do violate that, yes, we would be fined.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Ransom.
Thank you.
That's all I have. No one else with their hand up.
Okay. Well, we'll close the public portion of this meeting. Mr. Herbert, I think you've got your questions and homework.
I do, Mr. Chairman. In fact, my daughter is right outside my room here doing her homework, so I'll make sure my homework is done as well.
Okay. And I guess procedures, Mr. Husser, is the Environmental Commission needs to see a copy of responses to the recommendations that they made in the phase one. Is that procedure?
I'm sorry, is that to Mr. Hopkins or to me?
I was just confirming that that's what the Environmental Commission was asking.
Yes.
And I just want to say real quick, I don't want the board to think that I misled them. I was actually thinking about a different project that we were working on where the phase one did not recommend further action. So I just want to apologize to the board and specifically Mr. Huzar that I did not intend to mislead the board.
It's okay, Mr. Hopkins. You stated that you were not the environmental engineer.
Thank you.
Again, Mr. Chairman, will you require me to bring my planner back for our next hearing?
I don't know. It depends on how you guys work out the.
Okay.
If you come up with a variance, ultimately our goal here is the variance-free, waiver-free application. So,
right.
If we can get a waiver-free, variance-free application, then we won't need a planner, right?
Right. Well, we will, I believe we will, if we're able to take care of the issue of access, we will still need that variance, or some could argue it's a waiver with regard to the buffer. So I'm just finding out if the board has enough testimony on the record right now with regard to the buffer.
Yeah, I think we'll have to revisit all of it when we come back. So let's see where you guys land with the legalities of it, that were presented today.
Understood. Mr. Chairman, again, we do have our homework. We know what we have to do. We really appreciate all of the hard work by the board professionals. We appreciate your time tonight. I want to double all the board members' pay. And I just did want to thank you again for your professionalism.
Mr. Herbert, before you go, do you want to be carried to a date certain, or are you going to renotice?
Walter, are you there?
I think he just hung up.
He's coming back on. Walter, how fast do you think we'll be able to turn things around here? I mean, we'll meet with the property owners and come up with a design, but I'd like to carry it to a date.
That's a question. There's a lot of moving parts here. Yeah. I'm very confident with the legal issue with regard to right-of-way, what our redesign looks like. I think I've heard maybe half a dozen opinions this evening.
And let's see if we can set the time frame. Mr. Husser, when's the next time that the Environmental Commission is meeting?
Next Wednesday.
And after that, before the meeting in December at all?
It's the second Wednesday of every month.
Right.
Maybe, Mr. Chairman, your second meeting in December, if we could carry to that one.
Okay.
And there's 2 applications already on, but I will put you on there.
Thank you.
I also need an extension of time.
You have an extension of time. I'll send you something in writing.
Okay.
Eileen, what is the exact date for the second?
That is December 16th, 2021.
Okay. Chairman, would you like me to carry this one on notice? Make the announcement?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, for application case that we just heard this evening, SD 2998 Wadsworth Development, Ramtown Estates. This application, the public hearing will be carried on notice to the board's regularly scheduled meeting for December 16th, 2021, which is the second December regular scheduled meeting at 7 p.m. The meeting will be by Zoom. So you will not receive, if you received a 200-foot notice letter, you will not be getting another one. This will not be published again. It's being carried on notice to December 16, 2021, 7 p.m.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everyone have a wonderful night.
As well.
Next application is case number SP-1037 Pioneer at Howell LLC.
Hey, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'm gonna tap out because I gotta get going early in the morning, and if you're gonna, I have a feeling you guys are gonna go a little bit later than 10:30.
Okay,
All
Mr.
right.
Black. Understood.
So, have a good night.
You too.
I believe,
evening.
Mr.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Salvatore Alfieri on behalf of the applicant. As someone asked earlier in the evening, this application on a portion of this property actually started in 2017, and it was only for the corner lot. Since that time, the applicant bought 2 homes adjacent to this property on Colts Neck Road. So we're starting over. Everyone's going to be eligible to act on the application when it's concluded. This property, the corner lot, had an old abandoned house that has been demolished. And then the 2 additional homes that were purchased on Colts Neck Road were also demolished. Those demolitions took place with all the required permits and approvals by the township. We're going to introduce our engineer. We had 2 engineers because I wasn't sure which one was going to be available. So Joe, are you the one, or it's either Joe May or Mark?
I have Joe May here.
Okay, Joe. And Mr. Chair, we'll try and get as far as we can with him, and we'll break whenever you feel we should.
Before we go any further, I believe Mr. Nicastro has left the meeting as well. He was probably recusing himself from this case, so.
Yes.
What's on the record?
Hi, good evening.
So we still have, before we get going, we still have a quorum, right?
Yes.
Mr. May, can you please raise your right hand? I will swear you in. Mr. May, do you swear affirm that any testimony provided before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes, sir.
Can you please give us your business address for the record?
Yes, my business address is 801 Fay Court, Point Pleasant, New Jersey, 08742.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. May, we're going to have you qualified as an engineer. Would you place your credentials on the record, please?
Yes, sure, Mr. Alfieri. I'm a graduate of NJIT, 1993. I worked at CME from 1993 to 2004. Moved on to Short of Palma CMX to 2009, and I currently am the borough engineer in Spring Lake Heights. I've served as the planning board engineer in Spring Lake Heights, the planning board engineer in Keensburg, the zoning board engineer in Highlands, conflict engineer in Long Branch. I've testified in probably 50 boards throughout Monmouth and Ocean County.
If you will accept your credentials.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. May, are you going to be referring to any of the exhibits that we've provided?
Yes.
Which one are you referring to? The aerial?
Well, we'll start with the Colts Neck aerial. I think that would probably be the easiest.
Okay, that was A18, I believe. Do you have that?
Yeah, I'll share my screen. If I can do that right now, just bear with me.
A18 is correct.
There we go. Let me try and get this stuff out of your way. All right. The site is known as Block 182, lots 69, 6901, and 70. The total lot area is approximately 2¼ acres or 2.2 acres. The property is situated at the southwest corner of Route 33 and Colts Neck Road. There's about 300 foot of frontage along Route 33 and 440 foot of frontage along Colts Neck Road. As Sal indicated, there are 3 single-family homes located that have been demolished. The zoning is HD3, which is a highway development district. Surrounding property has a variety of uses. There's a Quick Check to the east across Colt Neck Road. There is a Dunkin' Donuts to the west in the commercial strip mall. South of the site, there's a single-family dwelling, and across Route 33, there's a gas station nursery, which is currently being demolished to accommodate the construction of the New Horizon Commercial Center. Diagonally across the intersection is Four Seasons at Colts Farm, which is currently under construction. And behind the site, there are residential homes that are part of Equestra and the Cove development. The site is now vacant and slopes consistently downward from the intersection to the rear of lot 69 and 69.01. In that area, there are a series of catch basins installed as part of Equestra, which take runoff from the site into their collection system. There are no freshwater wetlands, wetlands buffers, streams, floodplains, or environmentally sensitive features on the site. Sal, I'd like to put up exhibit 3 now.
Go ahead.
Can the board see this?
Yes.
Okay.
And this is a sheet from the plan set that was submitted, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And it's marked as A3.
Yes, sheet 3. The applicant is proposing to construct a 1-story building approximately 155 by 75 foot long, or 11,550 square feet. The building will have 5 medical uses and a small cafe in one tenant space. Access to the site will be via right-hand in and right-hand out on Route 33. There is also a full movement driveway located on Colts Neck Road. This driveway has been placed directly across from the existing Quick Check driveway. A paved parking lot is being proposed, which will accommodate 91 cars, as well as 1 unloading space for deliveries. The parking calculations require 72 spaces, so there's adequate parking on the site. There is a trash designated area for refuse pickup located on the southerly end of the project along Colts Neck Road, approximately 52 feet from the adjacent lot line. With regard to zoning, there are no bulk variance requested as the layout meets all setbacks and coverage requirements. However, relief is requested to permit part of the parking lot inside the 50-foot perimeter buffer to the non-residential use. This is up in this northwest corner here, this arc. This relief will be discussed detailed during our planner's presentation. In order to accommodate stormwater runoff, a split system has been designed. I'd like to go to the drainage plan if I could now.
Go ahead.
Okay. Share. Okay, can everyone see this plan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a split system. The roof area will be which is considered clean, will be going into a underground parking lot recharge system along the easterly portion of the property, and to the south end will take all the parking lot runoff and it will be retained and slowly let out into the existing storm sewer system where the site currently flows. The ultimate discharge point has not changed. The proposed rate of runoff is being reduced in accordance with your ordinance and DEP requirements. We're also proposing a significant amount of landscaping within the buffer areas, which I will show you that sheet now. You can see the plantings along the westerly line here, the southerly line, and some plants along the northwest corner of the property.
And Mr. May, while that map is up, I want to focus again on the buffer because that's the relief that you identified earlier. So behind the building, we meet the 50-foot buffer, and then to the left side of the plan, we also meet the 50-foot buffer entirely. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, the areas where we don't meet it, first of all, the area that's adjacent to the shopping center to the east, I guess that is, a buffer is not required on that specific section, at least as it relates to the area nearest to 33. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
So, and then the only area we would need is that corner piece where you identified, and I guess you'll show us with the with your arrow again, right?
Yes, in this area, and there's approximately 11 existing pine trees there, ranging in 12 to 24-inch caliper that will remain.
And what's on the adjacent property where the buffer relief is being requested?
That's actually a dead end. Looks like it was put in for future expansion to this property. There's a Dunkin' Donuts commercial. That's where the strip mall is located currently.
So there are no homes adjacent to the area where the relief is being sought. Is that correct?
No homes adjacent to this lot line, correct.
And no, I'm talking about, how about the other lot line that's there? No, the lot line that goes, you're right, that comes down towards.
Yeah, there are no homes in this portion. That's
And what about the line that comes now down to Colts Neck Road from that spot?
This one.
This one here?
No,
No,
left.
this one over here.
Oh, here?
Right, yes. What's over there?
That's a vacant area. That's a buffer next to the COA housing strip that is located in this area.
Okay, so no homes are located there.
No, there is not.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Continue, please.
Okay. Lighting is proposed, which will all be LED type. The building will be served by public water and public sewer, both available along the frontages. There is one freestanding sign which we will locate to address the engineer's concerns. The architectural plans you'll see later do have some building mounted signs which can be discussed during that portion of the presentation. And the project requires permits from NJDOT, Monmouth County, Freehold Soil, which are currently pending.
Would you discuss again the sign? You said it was going to be addressed. What exactly is being done with the freestanding sign?
The freestanding sign is currently within the setback requirement for signs. So they wanted 20 feet off the right of way. It's currently 10. We're going to move it 20 feet back so it will meet that condition.
So we're going to eliminate the need for that variance.
Yes, sir.
And then the waiver for the lighting intensity, are we going to comply and eliminate that waiver request as well?
We would prefer to not lower the lower the lighting to the 0.5 foot candles. We feel that the parking lot, the way it's designed, accommodates and gives us a safe property we need. It can be modified to have a slightly lower intensity if board desires, but we don't feel it's detrimental at this point.
Mr. May,
Yes.
the board's probably expecting me to make a lighting question. Does your lighting design meet the minimum requirements the IES requires?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Do you provide house side shields for any lights that may be spilling off your property, except for where it may be spilling onto Colts Neck Road or State Highway 33? I'm sure the chief would not mind any extra light on those highways at that intersection.
Yes, we can accommodate that.
Okay.
Mr. May, I have a question in regards to that offset, like adjunct parking lot up there in the northwest corner there.
Yes, sir.
Is that there to avoid a variance for the parking lot, parking space?
No, that was intentionally drawn that way in case in the future should the neighbors and the owners of this property decide to connect the two properties. You're
Gotcha.
talking this,
Okay.
this skewed area here,
Yes,
sir?
yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that's my
Okay, very good.
understanding.
Good, thank you.
And Mr. May, the CME report, which is dated September 30th, has a series of pages at the rear, which are called Technical Engineering Review number 5. The applicant would stipulate that it will address all of those technical comments as a condition of approval.
Yes. I'm just gonna go through my notes quickly. Bear with me. We're gonna move the sign. We're still gonna need relief for the buffer on 3B.
Right, no, we're past that. I'm at the end of the report. It's all just various technical, engineering technical comments.
Oh, yes, we don't have an issue complying with that. So.
Okay. And then in terms of, actually, John will talk about site circulation, so we don't need to do that now. Mr. Chair, members of the board, the use as indicated was 5, potentially up to 5 medical spaces. There might be a combination with if a tenant wanted larger space. The cafe has 30 seats proposed. And Mr. May, you indicated that the applicant more than complies with the required parking. Is that correct?
Yes, we more than comply with the required parking for this site. Yes.
And you discussed the stormwater management. The stormwater management design complies with the current regulations that came into place this year. Is that also correct?
Yes, they do.
Okay. That's all the engineering, Mr. Chair.
Mr. May, I have about 2.5 pages of variances and waivers in my letter. Is your planner going to touch on all of those? Or?
I can go through stuff in your letter, and then we can let the planner go through Jennifer's letter. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Oh, go ahead. We have 6 more minutes, so go ahead.
Okay. You want me to go through them, or you want to just ask me?
No, go ahead. They start on page 3, right at the
Yeah,
bottom.
3A, we're gonna move the sign. 3B, the buffer encroachment is limited to underground piping. The 50-foot buffer adjacent to the perimeter is around the neighboring community. We still need relief in the corner, but that's adjacent to commercial site.
Mr. May, can I just interrupt you?
Yes.
Regarding the buffer, I don't think it complies though, besides that portion you're talking about, it doesn't meet both 2 options that the buffer.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that for, he has that item in the planners. I think that's in the planners comments. So we'll address
In
that.
C, it's C. Page 3.
You know, we're gonna put a fence around the property. There's not enough room for a 6-foot high berm. And items 3 or 4 aren't really practical, would essentially render this property useless. We have met with I shouldn't say my understanding is from the design engineer, they met with the design professionals of the town, and they've come to create this plan through purchasing these properties, and actually scale this down even further to come up with this plan. So that's the relief we're requesting.
Yeah, so the plant material though in this buffer is not evergreens, just so the board is aware, it's made up of shade trees and ornamental trees.
And Mr. May, you mentioned a fence. Can you elaborate on that further?
Yeah, there's gonna be a fence put around the entire property, a 6-foot high picket fence.
So the front of the property too, or
No, I should say the southerly and westerly property lines, excuse me.
So everything except for the frontage on Cold Snake Road and Route 33.
Correct. Okay. Item 3D.
We the driveway width, just as an aside, and we will probably get into testimony more detail at a later meeting, but the fire official had issued a letter earlier about the driveway widths, and then he changed that letter. It's still dated May 25th, but it was updated more recently than May 25th, and in it, it says, the parking lot aisle width shown at 25 feet. This is adequate at this specific project due to the location and the design of the building. There's a 30-foot aisleway provided from Colts Neck Road. So the fire official was fine with the aisle widths. Earlier reports, the fire official had requested 30-foot wide aisle widths throughout the site, but he has since changed that after reviewing the plan. But again, that's a May 15th date. It was updated more recently.
And Mr. Alfieri, since you brought up fire, that was on my list to do. You'll comply with the other two items?
Correct. And then as it relates to items 2 and 3, we will comply. Yes.
Thank you.
But I wanted to, it's confusing the date of the reports because he never changed the date. So it's the one I just cited.
Yeah, he says it was updated on 10/26.
Yeah, he has a comment there on 10/26. He reviewed the plans and he sent that by email.
Okay, okay. Good. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe. Let's finish this
Mr.
comment.
Mayor, I think we were on D. Do you agree that you need a variance to 50-foot setback for parking?
Yes. Yes, I do agree. By putting that buffer along the parking area, it almost limits the site useless. And it's consistent with what is adjacent to all of the other two corners that commercially have commercial properties on them.
Mr. May, I think Mr. Rizzo is referring to you need a variance for your off-street parking area being located within 50 feet of the tract boundary. Is that correct? Not the buffer. That's a separate variance.
You're talking the top left corner.
It's 50 feet from a parking stall to a tract boundary.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
a lot of places.
Yeah, well, we indicated early on that that's the only one of the only ports we feel that we're
yes, we need
not
that
meeting.
variance.
Plus the frontage of Route 33 where there's 0 setback, and Colts Neck Road where you have 0 setback.
That's correct. We need all those variances. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. You went over the driveways. We can add landscaping, item E. We have no issue with that. No driveway buffer. We couldn't put the buffer in the rear because there's no pavement. So I mean, the loading area in the rear, there's no pavement behind the building. This was basically the only area that we could find that it worked for this site, considering we had a large linear parking area. That's where it was proposed. All trees will have a 2.5-inch caliper, 40 to 60 feet apart. We'll comply with that. We'll comply with the contribution to the tree fund.
Mr. May, it wasn't just the size, it's the quantity.
Okay. We can add more trees and go over your board professionals if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, they're supposed to go along the road. I don't think you really have enough space.
Do we have adequate protection with the parking stalls facing Colts Neck Road and highway to keep people from continuing to drive forward by accident?
It's a curb parking lot, so I'm not sure what more.
I know in the past we've had people put in those wooden barrier. Is that applicable here?
We
Mr.
can
Rizzo?
look at bollards or other types of structures to prevent that. We'll look at that between now and the next meeting.
Okay.
A timber guide rail would probably be what you're referring to.
Yeah, that's usually what Ms. Newman makes the recommendation on.
Yeah, so a timber guide rail you're not going to have room for right now. I don't think you'd have room for bollards either. It'd have to be a concrete wheel stop if you want to put it in the parking space. Or if you want to shift your parking spaces back.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Chair, it's after 10:30. We're gonna have to bring our engineer back anyway, so if you want, we can break now and come back and finish the engineer, bring the rest of the witnesses.
That sounds fair. Thank you, Dr.
So, and Eileen, my guess is that the applicant that was ahead of us, if they're redesigning, will probably not be ready for that December meeting. So I don't know if we can go on there and see what happens.
We can put you there. That's
Yeah,
December
understanding
16th.
that, yes, and we understand that there are other applications, but maybe maybe things will drop off and we can get some time.
And I just need an extension of time from you as well.
Right, and I'm texting our entire team right now to make sure they're all available for, that's what, 12/16, did you say?
Yes.
If
If not that one, the next meeting would be January 6th, which is reorg.
Right. All right, well, let's go for December 16th. Of course, we grant the board the extension through the end of the year. You want it? Yeah, we'll do it through the end of the year, but by December 16th, we can make a decision what we're doing that night. If that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
That sounds fine.
Chairman, should I make the announcement?
Yes, please.
Okay, if you're here for case number SP-1037, Pioneer Howell LLC, preliminary and final major site plan, the hearing that was just held is going to be carried on notice to the board's second regularly scheduled meeting in December, which is December 16th, 2021 at 7 p.m. It'll be by Zoom. If you received a letter in the mail or you saw it in the newspaper, you will not get another letter and you will not see it in the newspaper again. It's been carried on notice December 16th, 2021, 7 p.m.
Thank you.
And thank you for staying so late. I appreciate it. We'll see you hopefully in December.
Yes.
Everyone have a good night.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I don't think there's any reason to go to executive session, and our liaison for the master plan committee has dropped off. Is there any other business we need to discuss? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, everyone, have a great.
You forgot a second. You forgot a second, Brian.
Oh, sorry. Do I have a second?
Third.
All in favor? Everyone have a good night.
Good night. Happy
Have a good
Thanksgiving. I'll see
Thanksgiving.
you in December.
Yep, don't forget about the Howell Expo next week as well.